Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Fian had no time to care about this raucous laughter. Feeling the approaching danger, he quickly turned his body, controlling the water to surround him, swiftly deflecting the incoming spears and swords. At the moment the water dispelled those noble phantasms, Fian felt something unusual. The mystery and characteristics attached to these spears and swords. These are all noble phantasms. This discovery surprised Fian, and he pondered whether this method of firing noble phantasms like cannonballs was truly reckless. But he had to admit, the power was quite impressive. Whoosh! 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 Again, several gates of light opened, doubling the number of incoming noble phantasms, forcing Fian to divert his attention to fight against the hidden assailant, interrupting the release of his own noble phantasms. Not bad, you're worth my attention, unlike that fake sword-wielding fool below. Seeing Fian deflect his attacks entirely, accompanied by a cold snort, the true identity of the golden figure finally emerged. But before Fian could see clearly, another round of attacks came crashing down. Several golden gates opened, and more gleaming noble phantasms shot out. This time, the figure also rushed in at high speed, swinging 2 uniquely shaped golden scimitars without mercy. Clang! In an instant, the clash of blades occurred, and Fian then caught sight of the golden figure's true appearance. Red eyes like a serpent's, enhanced by golden vertical hair, exuding considerable valor, and clad in mythical golden armor that displayed this heroic spirit's extraordinary nature. But this strength. Berserker. No, the battle intent and mockery reflected in those red eyes could never be exhibited by a berserker. This was Archer. And the surprise in Fian's eyes was fully captured by this sudden emerging king. Humphrey, not bad. Worth my attention, let's see how much ability this mixed blood of yours has. In the brief exchange, the 2 figures quickly distanced themselves. Meanwhile, Artoria, trapped in the water prison, seized the opportunity to channel her magical energy, bursting forth with fierce azure winds, returning to the battlefield. However, in this battle, her presence was far less dazzling than before. In Fian's eyes, compared to the saber he had completely suppressed earlier, the suddenly emerging Archer was a greater threat, and as for Archer, he glanced at the holy sword in Saber's hand with undisguised disdain. Is that all you can do? However, he indeed meant that. He had once clashed with the holy sword wielder, and the strength displayed by the holy sword wielder, which was not inferior to his own, earned his recognition. When he was summoned by Tokiomi Tasaka this time and sensed the presence of the holy sword wielder, he felt a surge of excitement, eager to have another fight in this holy grail war to avenge their last encounter. However, when he arrived at the port, he was met with disappointment. Is this it? Is this it? A female holy sword wielder, presumably a parallel counterpart from another timeline of that guy. But that was fine, as long as she was a holy sword wielder, it would do. However, when he saw this so-called holy sword wielder being thoroughly suppressed by Lancer, even nearly sent back to the throne of heroes, his interest was completely gone. The gap in strength was just too vast. With the power displayed by this holy sword wielder, he could easily overpower her. But Lancer over there was interesting. He could have a little fun with him. Just as Gilgamesh felt some interest, wielding his dual blades formed from the Sword of Rupture, preparing to engage once more, a frustrating voice echoed in his mind. Respectful King of Heroes, please hold back, this is not the best time for battle. Oh? Tokiomi, are you ordering me? Are you teaching this king how to act? Not at all, this is merely advice from a humble servant. Through his familiar, Tokiomi saw Archer confronting 2 servants at the port, and he felt unsettled. Originally, when he saw Lancer and Saber fighting to the death, he was ecstatic, thinking that they would both be mutually destroyed, allowing Archer to finish them off. However, this arrogant king clearly did not want to engage in such a tedious affair. Just as a Lancer and Saber were about to fight to the death, he directly joined the battlefield, which not only saved Saber but also attracted Lancer's hostility. Tokiomi felt his blood pressure spike at this scene. Clearly, If he had just waited a few more minutes before making his entrance, he could have secured victory. Why did he suddenly intervene? Now, he had to confront two servants simultaneously. Such reckless actions left Tokiomi extremely anxious, prompting him to advise the legendary king. Foo ha ha ha, it's not that I don't want to, it's that I don't dare. Tokiomi, remember, it is not for you to command how this king acts. It seemed this legendary king had no intention of acknowledging him, still holding his dual blades, eagerly gazing at Lancer, while Lancer remained vigilant against Archer. Saber, caught in the battle, also kept her guard up against them, causing the atmosphere to become tense. Meanwhile, Tokiomi, rejected by Gilgamesh, couldn't help but turn pale with anger. A mere servant. Is that the heroic spirit summoned by Tokiomi Tasaka? In the port area, Matakaraya was observing the several heroic spirits present. When he heard Gilgamesh call out Tokiomi Tasaka's name, he was certain that this was the servant summoned by Tokiomi. Without hesitation, he ordered the restless berserker beside him to join the battle. Berserker, upon receiving the command, silently glanced at him. Don't worry, Berserker, my body can still hold up. You just go ahead and fight. Though they couldn't communicate, Karaya understood Berserker's intent. However, when he saw Berserker point towards Artoria, he asked with some surprise, are you interested in that saber? The Black Knight's eyes flashed with a crimson glow as he slowly nodded. Is that so? It seems you also have an ambition to fulfill. I understand. After we defeat that golden servant, can we help you face that saber together? The pitch Black Knight excitedly let out a couple of roars in affirmation. Then go fight, Berserker. Boom. A deafening sound suddenly erupted from nearby, drawing the attention of the servants present. Another servant has intruded. A raging surge of magical energy and a sudden, terrifying impact announced the arrival of a Black Knight, who charged onto the battlefield like a dark horse from the steel jungle. The Black Knight's piercing gaze caught sight of Gilgamesh perched atop a lamppost. The proud king also quickly sensed the Black Knight's gaze. While he enjoyed battle, being stared at by a mad dog that suddenly leaped out at him felt somewhat offensive to his noble self, and it required punishment. Mad dog, what are you staring at? The King of Heroes' treasury opened once more, and swords and spears protruded from the shimmering gates, aimed directly at the Black Knight. Since you dare to offend the king, you shall pay the price. I will tear you to pieces, mongrel. Accompanied by his cold declaration, various attack-type noble phantasms, including swords and spears, were launched like cannonballs. This method of fighting shocked Saber nearby, but indeed, only a servant like Gilgamesh could recklessly hurl precious noble phantasms around like ammunition. However, compared to Gilgamesh's excitement, Tokiomi Tasaka could no longer remain calm upon seeing another servant suddenly emerge, with clear hostility directed towards Gilgamesh. He thought to himself that he must stop Gilgamesh from continuing his reckless behavior. If the situation escalated into a real fight, Gilgamesh's overwhelming power would undoubtedly become the focus of everyone's attacks. While he had confidence in the King of Heroes' abilities, if the other two servants seized the opportunity to ambush during Gilgamesh's battle with Berserker, the situation would undoubtedly become imbalanced. Faced with multiple servants, even Gilgamesh would find it difficult to benefit, and it was entirely possible he could be eliminated. Such a thing could never happen. He must prevent him from causing more chaos. Chapter 19 Unexpected changes at the dock under the night sky. Gilgamesh was engaged in fierce combat with Lancelot, who had taken on the form of the Black Knight. The intense battle brought a sense of heat and tension to the cold, deep autumn night. Gilgamesh raised his hand and unleashed the legendary Babalu, as countless noble phantasms poured forth like cannonballs toward the Black Knight. Boom! The continuous roar of explosions filled the air as the noble phantasms fell, sending clouds of dust into the atmosphere. The immense shockwaves caught the attention of both Artoria and Fian nearby. Seeing Gilgamesh, who possessed numerous noble phantasms and could easily unleash such destructive force, Fian fell into deep thought, and in a moment of clarity, he instinctively sucked his thumb, as ideas began to crystallize in his mind. On the other hand, Artoria, who was watching the battle, was astonished by Gilgamesh's power. At the same time, she furrowed her brow, sensing a strangely familiar aura emanating from the Black Knight. Even though it was thinned by madness, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had some connection to this Black Knight. Was he an enemy from a past life? In the midst of battle, Lancelot, who was keenly aware of Artoria's gaze, fought even harder upon noticing her attention. Since Matuskin had been killed by the Count, Matakaraya did not proceed with the second madness incantation as planned. This allowed him, despite being a berserker, to maintain some awareness through sheer willpower. Sensing the familiar gaze from the king, he became even more excited. It was the king's gaze. The king was watching me. I cannot let the king down. Like a pumped-up athlete, Lancelot faced the incoming noble phantasms without fear. With his boundless martial prowess, he handled even these cannonball-like noble phantasms with ease. The Black Knight reached forward, firmly grasping the second incoming treasure, and with a swift movement, he transformed the two noble phantasms into his own weapon before hurling them back, accurately deflecting several more incoming noble phantasms. What incredible skill! Even as a berserker, he can display such power. Witnessing Lancelot's maneuvers left even the spectators in shock, while Gilgamesh, high above, had a face marked with changing emotions. Not bad skill. To retain and execute such prowess as a mad dog, you have given this king quite the surprise. Ignoring Gilgamesh's golden taunts, the Black Knight roared as he continued to catch the incoming noble phantasms, using them as his weapons to knock down the subsequent projectiles, all while casting glances of concern toward Artoria. However, the Black Knight's actions did not concern Artoria, instead, they furrowed her brow. What does Berserker mean? Is he provoking me? Is I his next target? With these thoughts, Artoria tightened her grip on Excalibur, determination flaring in her eyes, especially since the Black Knight's performance was no less formidable. TSK. Disgusting dog. Seeing his noble phantasms being tainted and transformed by Lancelot, Gilgamesh, who had a slight obsessive-compulsive disorder, naturally discarded those noble phantasms. He was also unwilling to use more advanced noble phantasms, fearing they might be similarly tainted by Lancelot. Although they were not high-grade noble phantasms. How dare you turn my noble phantasms into this state? You shall pay for this. Throughout his various periods, while his temperament wasn't the best, it was certainly among the top. Even he could not help but feel anger rise within him when he saw his noble phantasms being mistreated by Lancelot. Gripping his dual blades, he dove down from a streetlight, ready to tear apart this mad dog who defiled his noble phantasms. Boom. But suddenly, a thunderous roar echoed from the distant sky. Saber and Lancer exchanged glances, quickly retreating, while Gilgamesh, wielding his dual blades and pressuring Lancelot, remained undeterred as he sensed the approaching magical energy, deploying the king's treasury to unleash it toward Lancelot at such a close distance. Upon seeing the golden gates of light so close, Lancelot hesitated for a moment, wanting to employ the same technique to catch the flying noble phantasms. However, he was halted by Gilgamesh pressing against his arms, looking at him with a teasing gaze. Come on. Mad dog, come grab them. Let this king see how you plan to block this one. The moment the weapons met his armor, a tremendous explosion followed, sending Lancelot hurtling backward in disarray. The terrifying power left cracks in his armor, and his eyes glowed red as he glared fiercely at Gilgamesh. New servants have arrived. With the approaching source of magical energy and the booming sounds coming from above, the source of the noise became clear. Everyone present looked up to see a flying object tracing an arc in the sky, surrounded by a series of purple electric sparks, steadily coming closer. What is that? Hidden in the shadows, Matakaraya had a grim expression. From this close distance, he could naturally see the approaching flying object, but when he recognized it, he found it hard to believe. A vehicle flying through the sky. It's a war chariot. Fiant sucked his thumb and looked up, revealing the true nature of the flying object. However, it was no ordinary war chariot. This chariot was an ancient vehicle carved with a bull's head, and the steeds harnessed to the chariot were not horses, but two azure divine bulls, stomping through the thunder as they pulled the luxurious chariot. Fiant, of course, knew that the owner of this chariot was none other than the king of conquerors, Alexander the Great. However, he was puzzled as to why they chose to arrive at this moment. Wasn't their lord's command to observe and provide support? What was the significance of their arrival now? Compared to Fiant's confusion, Artoria on the other side was filled with apprehension. She sensed that the magical energy emitted by the chariot was formidable, rivaling the impact of that Black Knight. This new servant would undoubtedly be a troublesome enemy. Ha ha ha. Accompanied by Iskander's hearty laughter, the hooves of the bulls struck the ground, crashing the asphalt below into spiderweb-like cracks. The burly man on the chariot made his grand entrance, embodying Iskander. Rider. The chariot came to a halt, and Waver, who had been caught in a thrilling roller coaster ride beside Iskander, stood up in a daze, looking as distressed as a cat whose tail had been stepped on, shouting in dissatisfaction at Iskander. Baka. What were you thinking with this reckless flying? You almost got me killed just now. Slap. Hey. Iskander smiled faintly at him and then extended his hand. Ultimate skill, finger snap. Waver let out a scream, clutching his reddened forehead as he sat back down. Just stay quietly on the side for a while, my little master. The stage now belongs to the king, ha 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 ha. Laughing heartily, Iskander turned to the other heroic spirits present, starting to declare his true name to those around him. I am the king of conquerors, Iskander, descending to this world as rider. Heroes from different times and spaces, would you be willing to reveal your names? This sudden and baffling action left Fian perplexed. Even Gilgamesh was momentarily stunned, while Waver could only cover his head in disbelief. Rider. What are you doing? Are you just going to expose your true name to the enemy? Artoria was taken aback by the King of Conquerors' casual revelation of his true name but, feeling the need to reciprocate, introduced herself. After all, her true name had nearly been revealed when Lancer recognized her, thus, there was no longer any to conceal it. Oh? So this female hero is none other than the famed King Arthur? What an honor. I never expected to encounter another king during this Holy Grail War. And what about you? You also possess the aura of a king, golden servant, you must also be a king. Are you asking me? Seeing Iskander barge into the battlefield, Gilgamesh lost interest in continuing his confrontation with Lancelot. Though this mad dog had some skill, it did not pique his interest. Gilgamesh transformed into golden particles, returning to his beloved streetlight, looking down at everyone and declaring, among the heavens and earth, only I can command humanity and be worthy of the title of king. The rest are merely impostors masquerading as kings. Do I need to tell you my name again? Impostor king? Hearing this term, all the servants present raised their eyebrows. After all, aside from Lancelot, wasn't everyone else a king in their own right? Hearing Gilgamesh's arrogant claim, they couldn't help but feel some dissatisfaction. However, Iskander merely laughed it off, saying, even if you say you're so impressive, nobody knows. After all, there are so many kings out there. How about you reveal your own grand name? As a king, you shouldn't fear having your name known, right? Listening to Iskander's jest, Gilgamesh's red eyes flickered. So he's trying to provoke me to expose my true name, is he? This king has indeed been underestimated. Yet, he was right, he truly did not care whether his true name was exposed to them. There was nothing shameful about being a king. However, with this thought, a smile curved on Gilgamesh's lips as he slowly spoke. If I am the most noble and ancient king in this world, the king of kings, and you cannot even know my true name, then I have no choice but to leave it at that. However, Gilgamesh asserted this, and the Babylon behind him opened once more. This time, golden swords, spears, and countless weapons floated in the air, shining with brilliance. Unsheathed swords, sharp spears, and those weapons radiating powerful magical energy all appeared simultaneously. Unlike the earlier skirmishes, he no longer limited the number of gates, allowing countless golden portals to surround the scene. You can use your strength to prove whether you are qualified to know this king's name. Become my opponent, whether you are that mad dog over there, the holy sword wielder, or Lancer, you can all prove your worth to me through your strength. Faced with the barrage of attacking noble phantasms filling the sky, Waver panicked, hurriedly hiding behind Ryder. Meanwhile, all the servants present, both visible and hidden, felt intimidated by the sheer number of noble phantasms. Even from a distance, watching the battle through a telescope, Roy was shocked by Gilgamesh's displayed power. This was clearly the fourth Holy Grail War in Fuuki, so how had it escalated to this point? Why prototype Gilgamesh is here? Was Tokiomi Tasaka cheating? Although both were Gilgamesh, this proto-Gilgamesh was much harder to deal with than the original one. While the original was arrogant, he was not foolish enough to hold back or put himself in danger. The proto-Gilgamesh always gave his all against his enemies. The formidable strength of this proto-Gilgamesh had been experienced firsthand by the Holy Sword Excalibur wielder, Arthur Pendragon. In normal conditions, he could suppress the proto-Gilgamesh in close combat, while the Babylon could strike opponents from afar. The bow, composed of two finishing swords, had power rivaling EA. This guy's strength was completely off the charts, placing him among the top tier of heroic spirits. If he truly wanted to, he could potentially sweep through this Holy Grail War. At the very least, he could not defeat the proto-Gilgamesh with a count, and must plan carefully. Though there had been instances of Arthur Pendragon defeating him before, that was against the proto-Gilgamesh, and it was the fully liberated Arthur, who far surpassed Artoria in every aspect. Therefore, having Artoria replicate him to deal with the proto-Gilgamesh was simply impossible. Instead, among the servants present, Lancelot would not be an enemy to him, while Artoria would indeed be the easiest to handle. However, at this point, aside from Gilgamesh changing form, the Lancer group had completely switched from Diarmid to his superior Fian, but the other servants had not undergone significant changes. So, having completed the objective of scouting the enemy's situation, it was best to withdraw quickly. Who knows if Amiya Giratsugu was lurking nearby, ready to take a shot at him with a sniper rifle. After confirming this, Roy prepared to leave, uninterested in watching this iconic scene play out again. However, He was most surprised by Kenneth's group, who had managed to upgrade their servant, transforming from a deceptive trickster into the reliable Fian. Furthermore, upon seeing Waver's appearance, the opponent did not come out to taunt him, which was very unlike Kenneth. Fian? Could it be that the Lancer group had switched members? That was impossible. It was widely acknowledged that Kenneth wouldn't survive the Fourth War. What could have possibly gone wrong this time? What he didn't know was that Kenneth was currently engaged in friendly magical exchanges with a certain Magus killer. Tonight's battles among the servants were exciting, but the action among the masters was equally fierce. Emiya Giritsugu was limping desperately through a jungle of steel, with Kenneth's figure continuing to pursue him like a demon. Despite his doubts, Roy did not plan to probe further. He was already prepared to retreat. He had no intention of revealing himself in battle at this moment. After all, the Count could not be exposed. With the Count's strength and characteristics, he could serve as an assassin. If he were to clash head-on with these guys, he would undoubtedly suffer a brutal defeat. Tactical maneuvering was essential, and returning to finalize future plans was crucial. He somewhat agreed with Emiya Giritsugu. Since he couldn't defeat these servants, he would target their masters. By the way, where did the Count go? Didn't he say he would stay nearby to keep watch and return soon? Seriously? Looking at the empty surroundings, Roy suddenly felt a sense of insecurity. Chapter 20 Target Tasaka Residence. Usually calm and composed, Tasaka Tokiomi was now drenched in sweat, his hands trembling uncontrollably, betraying his inner turmoil. Listening to Gilgamesh's threats, feeling the abrupt cut in their communication, and the instant destruction of his surveillance familiars, Tokiomi didn't need an explanation to know what had transpired. Damn it. Archer actually went this far. Disgusted with Tokiomi, Gilgamesh had killed all the familiars sent to observe the battlefield, and as if that wasn't enough, he left a threatening message before forcefully severing their connection. Tokiomi. I advise you to recognize your position. This king never tolerates interference in his actions, not even from his own master. If you dare to continue overstepping your bounds, then this king will personally teach you what it means to respect your ruler. Humphrey. No one could meddle with Gilgamesh's decisions, not even Tokiomi, his master. This point was painfully clear, and even Kairiko Tamine, standing nearby, could feel the undisguised murderous intent emanating from the King of Heroes. As Gilgamesh's master, Tokiomi was sweating profusely, chilled by the realization. Gilgamesh had been serious. If Tokiomi dared to use a command seal to stop him, it might succeed in summoning him back, but once Gilgamesh returned, he would undoubtedly kill him. Though their time together hadn't been long, Tokiomi had learned enough about this ancient heroic spirit's temperament. Perhaps due to the timing of the summoning, this version of Gilgamesh wasn't as arrogant and brutal as described in legend. He was easier to get along with, possibly closer to the period when he sought the plant of immortality and gained enlightenment in mythology. Even so, Gilgamesh in this state was still not someone to be provoked lightly. If Tokiomi tried to interfere with his actions, it would unquestionably cost him his life. There was no doubt about that. But with such reckless behavior, acting independently and following his whims, how could a servant like this win the Holy Grail War? Tokiomi had already secured so much support before the war even began, yet here he was, facing new problems. How could he not be furious? But under the oppressive weight of the king's presence, he didn't dare to make a move. So now, all he could do was silently pray for Gilgamesh's victory. Father. As Tokiomi pondered, a small hand tugged at his suit. What is it, Rin? Why are you still awake at this late hour? Seeing his daughter, Tokiomi exhaled deeply and maintained his dignified composure in front of her. Father, Sakura has been asleep for a long time. Is she really okay? Patting Tasaka Rin's head, Tokiomi smiled and reassured her. Don't worry, Sakura is receiving treatment. When she wakes up, she'll be all better. The medicine Sakura drank was given by Gilgamesh, which reassured Tasaka Tokiomi. Due to Skinmatu's modifications and the crest worm's irreparable damage to Sakura's body and mind, the treatment process had become exceptionally difficult. Even though healing was possible, Skin's incomplete modifications to Sakura's body had caused trauma to her imaginary number affinity. Continuing with the treatment could further harm her magical abilities and even leave her with long-term health issues. For Tokiomi, this was hard to accept. If it were just a loss of magical talent, he could let his daughter live a peaceful and happy life, but damaging her constitution would affect her more deeply, something he, as a father, couldn't bear. Seeing the harm done to his daughter only intensified his hatred for Skin, to the point where he wished he could kill him with his own hands. Thus, when he summoned Gilgamesh, Tokiomi boldly made a request, offering to serve as his vassal throughout the Holy Grail War in exchange for a miracle to save his daughter. Upon hearing this, Gilgamesh looked at him with some surprise but didn't reject the plea. This wish wasn't excessive, Compared to the greed of others, it was a reasonable request. He considered it a reward for his summoning. Gilgamesh then retrieved a medicine from the Age of Gods from his treasury and had Tasaka Sakura consume it. Your daughter hasn't woken up because her body is healing itself while she sleeps. She'll be fine. Sakura. Thinking about the harm done to his daughter, Tokiomi felt a pang of pain in his heart. But recalling Gilgamesh's gift, the hand gripping his cane slowly relaxed. Forget it. Let him be. With Kairai and himself covering things, there shouldn't be any major issues. After soothing his daughter to sleep, Tokiomi sat back on the sofa and asked with some confusion, by the way, Kairai, what happened tonight? Why didn't Assassin follow the plan? It seems they haven't even been scouting near the docks. Kairai Kotamin replied, Master, it's not that Assassin didn't come. The king had already left the Tasaka residence before Assassin arrived. The king again. Never mind. There's something else. It seems Assassin is being constantly eliminated by a particularly fast servant. Not long ago, she reported losing contact with most of her duplicates near the docks. Assassin was being swiftly wiped out? In such a short time, they were able to detect and eliminate multiple assassins. This means the servant hunting them must possess high agility and excellent presence detection skills. Many servants have already appeared in this Holy Grail War. Saber, Archer, Rider, Lancer, and Berserker. Since these individuals have all shown themselves and haven't had time to hunt down the Husans, the only one left who could be responsible for killing Assassin on a large scale is the last unseen servant, Caster. However, it's hard to imagine a caster, reliant on magical fortifications, possessing such perceptive and agile abilities to eliminate assassins so quickly. I see. It seems that this caster is also a formidable enemy. Tokiomi thought with a sense of helplessness. His carefully laid plans were not only disrupted by Gilgamesh, but now his network of spies and hidden agents was being eradicated. Coupled with his servant's unpredictable behavior, he couldn't help but feel uncertain about the future. Though he didn't know how Caster was accomplishing this, he couldn't allow it to continue. Kairai, you mentioned earlier that Caster's master is likely an ordinary person caught up in the Holy Grail War, right? Yes, Master. Kairai Kotamin nodded and replied, Lancer's master is a lord from the Clock Tower, Rider also belongs to a student from the Clock Tower, and the Innsburn family controls the Saber slot. As expected, the Matu family summoned Berserker, so Caster's master is most likely that ordinary person. An ordinary person, huh? That's better. Then send Assassin to quietly approach and kill that intruder. Caster's abilities are quite troublesome for Assassin, so he must be eliminated. Tokiomi Tasaka calmly uttered these ruthless words as he gripped his cane. Kairai did not respond to the order. His gaze remained steady as he began to think. After pondering for a moment, he realized this didn't align with the principles of a priest, especially since Roy seemed to be a believer as well. Killing between believers, if not motivated by issues of faith, could lead to damnation. As he considered this, Kairai felt that such an action conflicted with his role as a clergyman. He questioned Tokiomi, Master, this doesn't align with the teachings. He is also a follower of the Lord, and he's an ordinary person. Isn't this a bit too cruel? Cruel? No, it's not cruel. Although he may have been involuntarily drawn into this conflict because of the Holy Grail, regardless of the cause, he has now entered a realm he shouldn't have. Whether for the sake of preserving the secrecy of magecraft or securing victory in the Holy Grail War, he must be completely eliminated, whether he is involved willingly or not. Must he be eliminated no matter what? This truly is cruel, Master. Is this how Magus operates? Even though it seemed wrong, Tokiomi's reasoning wasn't entirely incorrect. Everything he did was to lay the groundwork for winning the Holy Grail War. Although this approach conflicted with the Church's doctrines, Kairai didn't care much about dogma. Since he was Tokiomi's disciple, he naturally followed his orders. Understood, Master. After listening to Tokiomi's explanation, Kairai nodded and prepared to carry out the plan. Oh, Kairai, since Caster's master is an ordinary person, they're likely hidden inside Caster's workshop. But we don't yet know the level of protection around it, so it's best not to take unnecessary risks. What do you mean, Master? Send Assassin to kill him, but don't deploy too many. Just send a few of the most elite assassins for the assassination. If they succeed, all the better. If not, at least we'll have tested Caster's strength. With just a few words, Tokiomi had already treated Assassin's life as expendable. However, he didn't care about this. Assassin's individual strength wasn't impressive, but their large numbers made them ideal as disposable pawns. Besides, as the master, why should he care about the feelings of mere servants? If not for Gilgamesh's unique nature, he wouldn't even care about him. In his eyes, whether it was assassin or archer, they were merely tools to obtain the Holy Grail. For now, they needed to be kept in check, but once the goal was achieved, they would no longer matter. rubbing the command seals on the back of his hand. A cold gleam flashed in Tokyomi's eyes. Chapter 21. 21 Assassin and Avenger. The rustling of footsteps, heavy breathing, and the crackling of flames filled the air. Pa. 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 From the port area to Central Park, dark figures sped through the shadows of the night. Ah! Amidst the gasping for breath, a sudden, piercing scream rang out, signaling the death of yet another clone. The rest of the shadows fled even faster. Damn it, that guy is still chasing me. This thought echoed in every shadow's mind. There's no escape, no way to shake him off. The one pursuing them was terrifyingly relentless. Despite their large numbers, they couldn't break free from his hunt. Even when they scattered in different directions, that figure would catch up and kill them one by one with terrifying speed. There was no chance to put distance between them before being hunted down. But why? Why couldn't they even hide from him with their rank presence concealment? There was some confusion, but far more fear. When Assassin's prideful concealment proved useless, a sense of helplessness welled up from the depths of their hearts, leaving their limbs cold. The precision and lethality they once prided themselves on had already been lost in the panic of their flight. Upon closer inspection, these fleeing shadows differed in height, build, and even gender. Their only common trait was the night-suited tight clothing that blended seamlessly into the darkness, and the distinctive, eerie white bone masks they wore, marking their origin. Assassin, Hassan of the Cursed Harm. Those who bore this mask were undoubtedly members of the Hassan, and the only role they were suited for was that of assassin, the legendary origin of all assassins. As expected, they were all different facets of a single assassin, hundred-faced Hassan. Each shadow represented one of Hassan's numerous personalities. Some specialized in assassination, survival, or even daily life skills. Together, these diverse personas made up the whole, 100 but also one. During her lifetime, hundred-faced Hassan split her mind into over 100 personalities for assassination, allowing her to adapt to any situation and complete her mission. As a servant, these personalities could now manifest independently, allowing her to truly become 100. According to tonight's plan, one of the weakest clones was supposed to infiltrate the Tosaka residence, sacrificing itself as a display for all the masters to see. The goal was to make everyone believe Assassin had been eliminated, allowing her master to hide in the shadows and form an alliance with Archer's master, turning the tide in their favor. But, after hearing the plan, the arrogant king's eyes flashed with anger. Ignoring the alliance, he easily killed the clone sent to inform him, then vanished into spirit form. And so, the perfect performance ended before it could even begin. Though the pointless loss of a clone annoyed hundred-faced Hassan, this was the duty of a servant. After reporting the situation to her master, she diligently resumed her role in the Holy Grail War. They were then ordered to gather intel in a port area, observe the powers and characteristics of each servant, and, if possible, identify and kill their hidden masters. At first, everything was going smoothly. The servants engaged in battle didn't seem to notice their presence, and they were able to observe the servants' extraordinary powers and specialties. But where did it all go wrong? How did we get discovered? Ah! In a fleeting moment of thought, another scream pierced the night as a hand wreathed in black flames effortlessly pierced the slowest assassin. Splat! The shadow, slain midair, dissolved into spirit particles, carried away by the wind. 3 left. The king of the cavern coldly watched the 3 fleeing shadows ahead, his golden eyes flashing with a glint of light, devoid of any emotion. Tonight, he was indeed a bit angry. These scum, who only lurk in dark corners, actually dared to use such petty tricks to lure him away from his master. As expected, these annoying assassins had already mistaken him for the supposedly dead caster. Although they didn't know his true power, they assumed his combat ability and basic explosive power were far inferior to the other servants. As a caster, he wasn't in his workshop, and his master was nearby. With such a significant advantage, the assassins naturally couldn't resist. Even though they were weak, Caster was weak too. Since he wasn't in his workshop and his master was close by, they had the upper hand. Why wouldn't they dare to attack? Even if the assassination failed, they could easily escape. So, taking advantage of this opportunity, the assassins sent out several duplicates to draw him away. If that didn't work, they would tie him down, while others would sneak off to assassinate his master. The plan was solid, even calculating Caster's lack of explosiveness and weakness when fighting outside his workshop. But unfortunately for them, they seem to have misunderstood something. When did he ever say he was a caster? He was a vengeful wraith from hell, and these souls, filthier than frog urine, dared to scheme against him? In the astonished gazes of the assassins, the count exploded with immense speed, piercing through the spiritual cores of the assassin sent to restrain him at the speed of light, before turning back to aid his master. The assassins who attempted to assassinate his master immediately sensed something was wrong and chose to retreat, but it was already too late. The vengeful spirit had already locked onto them. The vengeful spirit had memorized the scent of their souls. No matter how many bodies they split into, they could not escape. 2. After confirming that the Husan corpse he had shattered had turned into spiritual particles, the Count, with his A-ranked agility, randomly chose a direction and once again hunted down the remaining Husans. Run, faster. Even faster. They could already see the light. As long as they could get through here, as long as they could leave this area, as long as they could reach that place. Boom. In that fleeting moment, just as they were about to reach the light, the last two Husans once again heard it. The familiar toll of the evening bell. Just like the sound they heard at the end of their lives. Boom. Boom. Swish swish swish, accompanied by the sharp sounds of something slicing through the air. 6 silver projectiles, seemingly from nowhere, precisely pierced their vital points. And then they dissipated. The vengeful spirit chasing after them stopped in his tracks as he sensed a new presence. Standing ahead of him was a young man with slightly dark skin, wearing the robes of a saint, his white hair slightly tousled. The boy faced him, extending a friendly hand in greeting. "Would you come down to meet me, Mr. Avenger?" The Count simply gazed at him calmly for a moment, did not respond, and after confirming something, swiftly turned and left. "Oh dear, not coming down? Are you afraid of an ambush? Or perhaps you still don't trust me?" Seeing the Count leave so decisively, Amakusa didn't seem surprised. After all, the timing of his appearance was indeed a bit suspicious. But it didn't matter. From the first moment they met, he had already seen through the other's identity, Avenger, though his true name was still shrouded in flames and couldn't be seen. An Avenger-class servant, huh? It seemed that he was the other chosen one selected by the world. But something still felt a bit off. "Let's hope there won't be any problems." The boy turned and left. "I'll chase after the assassin. You find a safe place to hide, and if there's any trouble, use a command seal to call me back." Is that really how a command seal should be used? Seeing the message from the Count, Roy glanced at the command seal on the back of his hand and shook his head. "Still," he replied to the Count. "Got it." Roy didn't return to the base. His identity had already been known by Kotamine Kairai before the Holy Grail War even started, and naturally, Tasaka Tokiomi knew it just as well. Given their morals and the way Magi operate, it would be strange if they didn't send assassin to stake out his house. Fortunately, aside from some memories left behind over the past few years, there wasn't anything particularly important in that house he'd lived in for so long. Plus, its location was ridiculously remote, with only a few houses in the surrounding suburbs. Abandoning it wasn't a big deal. In this situation, he could still make clear decisions. Tonight, there would inevitably be visitors. But they'd only be unwelcome guests, and for such visitors, he had thoughtfully left behind some carefully prepared gifts inside the house for the intruders who were sure to come. By his calculations, it should be activating around now. The night was cool and quiet, the world at peace. To ordinary people, this might have seemed like a calm night, no different from many other. But for him, this night, and the days that followed, were destined to be anything but peaceful. And the act of shattering that peace would begin with the rapid combustion of a blue butterfly that hovered beside him. Watching the burning familiar, a burst of dazzling flames erupted in the distance. Precisely in the direction of his home. In the next moment. Boom. The explosion roared like a clap of thunder, accompanied by bright firelight, painting half the night sky red. A raging sea of fire surged forth, blossoming into a fiery spectacle in the night sky. Burning, boiling, forming a firestorm fierce enough to strike fear into the hearts of men. It really is quite beautiful. Watching the sea of fire ignited by the chain explosion of dozens of specially rigged gas canisters, Roy removed the cigarette from his mouth and stamped it out underfoot. He didn't have Emiya Garatsugu's expertise to acquire C4, but he had his own makeshift method. All it took was getting a few gas canisters ahead of time, infusing them with some magical energy, filling the house with them, and then rigging a small device that would ignite upon detecting magical energy. Once triggered, it created this effect. The chain reaction of a gas explosion is a simple principle. But the effect seemed decent enough. As he gazed at the towering flames and listened to the panicked shouting around him, he calmly pulled up his hood and slipped unnoticed into the crowd. As if none of it had anything to do with him. The sound of flames burning, the night wind blowing, and the noise within his heart all roared. Regroup at the new base, Count. Under the cover of night, he walked away into the distance. Chapter 22, 22 Rest. What exactly are you trying to do, Ryder? What do you mean? The King of Conquerors scratched his face. What? Do you still have the nerve to ask me that? You completely ignored Professor Kane's plan. How are we supposed to explain this when we get back? And you made me look like a fool in front of all those servants. I'm your master. Don't forget, I'm the master. On the streets of Fuiuki City, having just left the battlefield, Waver angrily tugged on Iskander's cloak and yelled, his face flushed with embarrassment. Is that all you're upset about? Haha, well, in a gathering of so many heroic spirits, how could this king's heart of conquest possibly remain still? Listening to his little master's endless nagging, Iskander picked at his ear with his pinky, clearly irritated. The boy had been whining ever since they left the battlefield, repeating the same things over and over. It was enough to give him ear sores. But what annoyed him even more was his master's attitude. It was hard to look at. An awful mix of insecurity and arrogance, with no trace of the spirit of conquest. Naturally, someone like that couldn't understand his actions. Stupid writer. Idiotic writer. The situation was perfect just now. If we'd just followed the plan and continued observing, everything would have gone smoothly. But you charged in, and even revealed your true name to everyone. What were you thinking? Once we get back, Professor Kenneth is definitely going to kill me. What should I do? It's all your fault, writer. Hearing Waver's frantic complaints beside him, Iskander frowned slightly. Enough. Quiet. Finally losing his patience, Iskander grabbed Waver by the collar, effortlessly lifting him off the ground. With his feet dangling in the air and the sight of Iskander's fierce tiger-like eyes, Waver felt a wave of fear. What? What are you doing? You're not going to kill your master, are you? Terrified by Iskander's threat, Waver's entire body began trembling, and he slowly raised his right hand. I'm warning you, don't forget, I still have command seals. At such close range, Waver found himself face to face with Iskander's intense gaze. The shrinking distance between them only made him tremble more violently, tears were about to spill from his eyes. With Iskander's massive frame, the pressure was unbearable. Humphrey, I was just teasing you, kid. Seeing Waver's panicked expression, the previously serious Iskander suddenly broke into a grin. Then, with a casual flick, he tossed Waver to the ground with a thud and burst into hearty laughter. Ha ha ha. My little master, how was it? Did you feel the aura of dominance this king possesses? Ouch. Waver yelped in pain. Seeing Iskander laughing, he quickly scrambled to his feet and protested. Feel your dominance? What nonsense. Why can't you be more like Lancer? How can there be a servant like you who treats their master this way? Humphrey. Flick. Ouch. Humphrey, I am who I am. My dominance is naturally different from Lancer's, and this is part of your training. Training? You're timid and lack ambition. Did you join the Holy Grail War just to assist your lemon-headed professor? Don't you have any ambitions of your own? You've been whining since earlier, and I can't stand it anymore. Since the Holy Grail chose you, it means you have a wish you want to fulfill. If that's the case, then you should fight for it. What's the point of being so cowardly? Ambition. Of course, I have something like that. But there's no but about it. Iskander suddenly interrupted. You entered the Holy Grail War to prove your worth, to gain that Lemonhead's recognition, didn't you? But if your ambition is really just that, then you're truly pathetic. That would make you nothing but a useless tool with no spirit of conquest. A useless tool? That phrase made Waver recall his time at the clock tower. Whether it was his classmates from prestigious Magus families or the high-ranking instructors, they had all called him that. Those words had deeply wounded him. No matter how hard you try, you're still just a worthless tool with no lineage. A useless tool? I'm not a tool. Enraged and humiliated, Waver stood up, glaring at the stern-faced Iskander, and shouted, Yeah. I'm exactly as you said. Pathetic and small-minded. I didn't expect even you would lecture me. What's wrong with wanting to prove myself? After all, you're just a mere servant. What do you know? Can you understand what it feels like to be despised and ridiculed by your professor, your classmates, and the entire world? Do you know how hard I've worked in silence just to prove myself? You're right. I want to prove myself. I want to destroy this ridiculous noble bloodline theory, become a renowned magus, and show Professor Kenneth and the entire world what I'm capable of. What's wrong with that? Not listening to Waver's furious outburst, Iskander didn't respond. He merely observed the young man in front of him. A boy who was prideful, insecure, and not inherently bad, but trapped within his own mental cage. How tragic. As he advanced on what he thought was the right path, he was unknowingly trapped within his own world. A prisoner of his obsessions, unable to see the truth, unable to glimpse the vast possibilities ahead, and blind to the reality around him, only sinking further. Why aren't you saying anything, Ryder? Are you scared? That's right, you should be. If you don't want to be eliminated from the start, then follow my lead. Remember, I'm the master. Ha 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 ha. At Waver's ridiculous demand, Iskander didn't argue. He merely laughed heartily and said, Afraid? The only thing this king has ever feared is that my legs might give out before I reach the ends of the earth and complete my journey of conquest. Since you insist, do as you please. Stay by my side and witness the true power of conquest. Perhaps one day, you'll break free from that narrow cage of yours. With that, Iskander effortlessly picked Waver up again like a kitten and summoned his Gordius wheel, thundering across the sky once more. Ah! I've told you so many times, you stupid rider. Stop carrying me like this. And don't go so fast, I can't handle it. Ha 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 ha. The cheerful sound of laughter and Waver's cries echoed through the sky, accompanied by the rumble of thunder. Damn it. Tokiomi Tasaka cursed angrily. He never expected Roy, a mere outsider, to be so ruthless. Not only did Assassin's assassination attempt fail, but the entire force was wiped out, leaving behind a huge mess. As Tasaka looked at the towering flames in the distance, veins bulged on his clenched fists. He was, after all, the overseer of Fuiuki City's ley lines and a secret collaborator with the Holy Church in this Holy Grail War. The chaos and destruction caused during the war would partially fall on him to compensate. Roy's cunning move, abandoning his base and orchestrating a chain of gas explosions, had completely caught him off guard. Kairai, have you found any trace of that boy? No, Sensei. The fire over there is too intense, and the residents are in chaos. We can't track him in such a dense crowd. I see. Tokiomi sighed helplessly and said, I'll leave the cleanup to you, Kairai. As you wish, Sensei. Kairai nodded, giving a detailed report. The area was in the outskirts, so the explosion didn't cause any casualties, though the flames have engulfed many nearby shops. The fire is now under control, but the financial losses are substantial. I understand. You may go. Don't forget to silence the media. Under no circumstances can the mystery be exposed. As for a reason, let's say it was a natural gas leak. A natural gas leak, huh? Kairai nodded and replied, understood, Sensei. What is it like to burn down your own home? He wasn't sure if there was any thrill akin to the art of explosions, but watching the place he had lived in for so many years, the fruit of his hard work, turn to ashes in an instant, left his heart far from calm. But now, none of this mattered to him anymore. Sacrificing a house to deal with a servant's clone? No matter how he looked at it, it was a huge gain. Besides, the aftermath would be enough to distract Tokiomi Tasaka and Kairiko Tomine, giving him a bit more time to catch his breath. Roy shook his head, running through these thoughts in his mind as he jogged against the flow of the crowd. Eventually, he arrived at an abandoned outpost of the Fujimura group on the outskirts, using it as a temporary shelter. After all that running around, Roy glanced at the fiery sky in the distance and managed to pull out a weary smile. The fatigue in his eyes and the bittersweet smile on his lips were unmistakable. Witnessing the immense power of the servants, along with the ever-lowering standards of the masters, had left him mentally drained. After working so hard for so long, maybe it was time to rest for a bit. Looking at the makeshift bed of cardboard boxes beside him, he smiled tiredly and collapsed onto it, falling asleep instantly. A good rest was needed. What lay ahead would be even tougher. I've arrived. Where are you? The shadows of the night stretched silently. A sleek, black figure skillfully avoided the few blue butterflies lingering at the entrance and quietly slipped in. He had survived. He was the only one who lived through the chain of gas explosions. At that time, his mission had been to stand guard and monitor the perimeter, but the sudden blast near him had sent him flying. Thankfully, the distance had spared him from death, though he was heavily injured. Afterward, he began scouring the area, continuing his search for the caster's master, who had yet to reveal himself. Although it was difficult to find someone in the crowd, it wasn't impossible. Facial expressions, physical states, and body language all convey information. As a Husan, he was adept at reading these signs. And since they had seen Roy's face at the Holy Church, recognition would be immediate if he found him. In his swift search, he soon noticed someone quietly moving against the flow of the crowd and began following him, hiding his presence with a rank presence concealment to track his target effortlessly. However, something puzzled him. Master had said this boy was just an ordinary person, so why did he now carry the aura of a Magus? This made him hesitate to strike, suspecting it could be a trap. Then, when he saw a few pale blue butterflies being released by Roy, Assassin understood. He realized why Roy now bore magical energy. He had become a Magus. No longer an ordinary person, he had become a master. Judging by the timeline, this meant he had transformed from a regular human into a Magus in an incredibly short period. It seemed absurd, but it wasn't incomprehensible. After all, Roy's summoned servant held the most mysterious of the caster classes, and helping Roy become a master in such a short time wasn't out of the question. This place, an incomplete and makeshift magical workshop, was Roy's temporary base. So, Assassin decided to strike while the boy had lowered his guard, and with caster not around, it was the perfect moment. Yet, just as he skillfully bypassed all obstacles and reached Roy's side, preparing for the kill. Ugh! A sudden attack caught him off guard, and before he could react, his body was flung back several meters. Who are you? Turning his head, he saw a pair of golden eyes glaring fiercely at him. And then, a hand wreathed in black flames effortlessly pierced through his chest. The speed was unavoidable. In shock, he looked up, only to see a face with a mocking smile, as if ridiculing his incompetence. Humphrey! Boom! The black flame surged again, and with the shattering of Assassin Saint Graf, his body was entirely consumed by the fire before him. Chapter 23, 23 Tea Party. In the world of dreams, where illusion and reality constantly overlap, the sea of flowers in paradise extended to the sky, and the rainbow light faded in the sky. A naturally curly-haired Magus, with hair close to white and rainbow-colored, had set up this dream tea party in the sea of flowers within the dream. He spoke to the dreamer. A sea of flowers. The once fragmented dream and memories gradually restored themselves with the swaying flowers. Roy looked at this unwelcome intruder with some surprise. He knew who Merlin was. The scum of scums, a crowned degenerate, one of the main culprits who had caused King Arthur's downfall. It could be said that anything connected to Merlin was rarely a good thing. Now that this man had intruded into his dreams, Roy immediately felt something ominous, suspecting that things were not as simple as they seemed. So, may I ask why the esteemed Sword Master of Britain has gone out of his way to enter my dream? Oh dear, I'm just an ordinary court magus. How did I suddenly become the Sword Master of Britain? Although I do occasionally find it more convenient to swing a sword than chant those long-winded spells that might make me bite my tongue. Is that why no matter if it's a blue card or red card, you're always swinging a sword at people? Looking at Merlin's cheeky grin, Roy started pondering Merlin's intentions. Though outwardly kind and warm, in reality, this creature was a monster. An utterly rotten one. Not even a human being. Glancing at the 3 crimson command seals still on the back of his hand, feeling the connection to the Count was still intact, Roy relaxed a little. The Count possessed the ability to traverse dreams. With him around, Merlin shouldn't be able to pull any tricks on Roy. His sense of security immediately increased. No need to worry. Though my reputation might not be the best, I won't harm you, so please don't call that fierce guy in here, okay? Roy was puzzled. You know about the Count's abilities, and you still dare to enter my dream? Well, you probably noticed by now. I didn't just try to reach out to you this once. It's just that the last few times, I got chased out by that Avenger by our side. I really didn't expect to get kicked out of a dream, but... Merlin scratched his head, looking somewhat troubled as his gaze turned to the changing scenery of the flower sea around them. He showed a thoughtful expression, though it seemed like he enjoyed speaking in half-finished sentences. You really are full of surprises. This dream of yours. The scenery here is beautiful and unexpectedly suits me. My dream suits you? Are you saying? Roy frowned. You're telling me this isn't a landscape you created? That's right. The scenery here wasn't created by me. Instead, it's something you conjured up from thin air in the dream. As the master of this dream, you are the dream builder. Though there are some slight differences from the real Avalon, this tower at the end and a boundless sea of flowers are extremely similar, both in color and design. So tell me, Roy, a boy who has never set foot in Avalon, how do you know its full appearance? Merlin asked with a smile. I'm here is very curious. Avalon? Roy was stunned, turning his head to observe the surrounding scenery, his face showing a bit of shock. This place had been constructed by him. Merlin was asking how he knew what Avalon looked like. But it was meaningless. Before coming to the moonlit world, Roy had once seen the Tower of Avalon in the noble phantasm Merlin had unleashed, along with the sea of flowers that filled the underworld, forming his initial impression. So the moment he saw Merlin in the dream, his subconscious immediately associated Merlin with Avalon, which caused him to instinctively construct the full image of the land of the fairies from his memory. After thinking for a moment, Roy looked at Merlin again, only to find the same smiling face still waiting for his answer. Why did that smile seem so punchable? But how should he answer? Or had Merlin already figured out his origins? It wasn't impossible. Merlin seeking him out likely meant he had been observing Roy for some time. With his X-level clairvoyance, it wouldn't be impossible for him to have seen through Roy's identity, but... Roy remained silent, his mind racing as he quickly analyzed the situation. Well, if you really don't want to say anything, that's fine. I won't pry any further. After all, everyone has their own little secrets. But, you know, I actually know quite a bit about you. After all, I've got a pretty good pair of eyes. Merlin pointed to his clear eyes. Clairvoyance X, he was laying it all out in the open. Merlin was honestly admitting that he'd been watching Roy with his clairvoyance. With that expression, it seemed like this would be a long-term situation. So much for any secrets. Then may I ask, oh great and all-powerful sword master of Britain, why you've come looking for me? Well, of course, there's a reason. But how about we change locations and discuss it further? Why don't you come to my place? Your place? Yes, my place. Merlin gave a meaningful smile, pointing to the enormous tower standing nearby, then waved his staff. With a flick of magecraft, the sea of flowers obscured Roy's vision, and a thought shifted. When he opened his eyes again, the two of them were now sitting on soft down-filled sofas. A simple stone table stood between them, while paintings adorned the walls, and beautiful carvings decorated the flawless walls. Outside the window, the flower-covered bridges made Roy feel as though he were in a fairy tale land. Is this Avalon? Then. Don't tell me I've been imprisoned in this tower like you? Looking at the beautiful stone room around him, Roy had a bad feeling. Why don't you guess? Merlin raised an eyebrow, nonchalantly picking up the cup of flower tea on the table, smiling faintly as he drank it. PFF tea. He immediately spat out the tea. Cough, cough. What in the world is this? Looking down, Merlin saw that the once fragrant flower tea had transformed into a concoction of hot sauce, mustard, and vinegar. To make matters worse, a dead fish head had suddenly floated to the surface. How disgusting. Ugh, what did you make me drink? An English delicacy, Stargazy fish sauce. Is it really that bad? Roy raised an eyebrow, picked up his own cup of tea, and sipped it carefully. The familiar fragrance reassured him that it was indeed the tea he remembered. Bleh. How could such a strange thing taste good? How can there be such food in England? Well, that's unfortunate. It was just a simple experiment. Since I can still manipulate things in this dream, it means we're still in my dream. This tower, you lured me into imagining it using magical suggestion, didn't you? Ah, you figured it out so easily. Indeed, you're right. I don't have the power to pull people into Avalon at will. Well, unless you had the sheath, of course. Merlin scratched his head. This is still your dream, so you're in control of everything here. I had planned to give you a little scare, but you've seen through it too quickly. How boring. But, young man, this is a rare opportunity. It's not often that someone gets to control their own dreams so freely. You could try. You know, all sorts of bold things now. Seeing Merlin's sly grin, Roy felt a black line of frustration cross his face. Then, with a slight thought, he moved the dream. Oh my? What's happened to me? When he looked again, Merlin had transformed into a beautiful young woman. His white robes were replaced with a simple white dress, his previously slim figure now voluptuous, and his legs covered in tight black stockings. Merlin had become woman. This was the first time Merlin had truly changed into a woman. He had only ever used illusion magecraft to appear female before, but this was a direct physical transformation. It felt strange, yet oddly fascinating. So, young man, you prefer me this way? Although incubus don't really have a gender, I prefer presenting as male. But since you like it, let this on-chan keep you company. Merlin stuck out her tongue playfully. Roy's frustration deepened. He just accepted being a woman so easily? To pervert yourself this much? You're really something. Fine, I give up. Do whatever you want. But let's get to the point. I doubt you came here just to mess with me. Alright then, let's talk business. Merlin smiled faintly and continued, first, I apologize for intruding on your dream. Even though I'm not human, I know that for humans, this is quite rude. I'm willing to offer compensation for it. There wasn't really another way. My real body is still trapped in the tower, so I can't physically leave. I can only watch and make contact with the outside world through this method. The reason I was able to enter your dream so precisely is because you carry my magical suggestion. Merlin pointed to the spot on Roy's body where he bore a magic crest and began explaining. That Magus Elgin, in his younger days, specialized in water-based magecraft, particularly its butterfly magic crest, which happens to align perfectly with my illusion magecraft. So, during his time in London, I made some contact with him and gifted him a book on illusion magecraft. Some of what I left behind must still be in his magic crest, which you've inherited, enabling our connection. Now that the Magus Elgin's magic crest has fallen into your hands, it's allowed me to make this contact. So the illusion magecraft knowledge in that crest. It was from you? How about it? Isn't it impressive? That magecraft is on par with what you modern magus call grand-level magecraft. It's something even Magus himself couldn't master. Unfortunately, he abandoned butterfly magecraft and went down the wrong path. Okay. But what does that have to do with me? Your plans should be related to King Arthur, right? Roy paused before continuing. My only goal is to survive the Holy Grail War. I doubt I can help you. I've barely mastered any magecraft, so asking me to go up against other masters is out of the question. If you need the Count's help, you'll have to ask him yourself. I'm just his accomplice, not his master. Just an accomplice, not a master? That's an interesting way to put it. Merlin waved his hand and continued, but I won't ask him for help. We've already met, but he's quite special. He's brought with him a certain mission in this world, and asking him for help would only make things worse. Honestly, I have a hard time dealing with beings of such concentrated hatred. Compared to him, you're much easier to talk to. But I don't want to talk to you. Ah, don't be so cold. I even transformed into your favorite Merlin for you. Let's have a good chat. Get away from me, you pervert. Up in the tower, after some playful scuffling, the two eventually returned to their seats, breathing heavily. You pervert. Why are you so persistent? I raised my strength, and I still can't overpower you. Hey, even though this is your dream, don't forget I'm an incubus. It's only natural that I can alter the dream. Otherwise, I'd get killed in dreams too easily. Merlin stuck out her tongue at Roy. After all that commotion, the old pervert didn't show any signs of exhaustion, but Roy felt incredibly tired even within the dream. Enough messing around. Tell me what you really want, though I can't promise I'll agree. That's fine. Just having this conversation is enough. But before that, the night is still young. Let me tell you a story about a king. I refuse. Don't be so quick to refuse. As payment for listening, I'll reveal the changes and abnormalities in this Holy Grail war after the story. Then you'll understand everything. How about it? It should be useful to you. In the tower, under the shimmering light, the rising flower fields illuminated the two tea drinkers. At some point, the ground beneath them had turned into a water surface, ripples gently spreading, reflecting their figures. Chapter 24, The King's Story. As dawn turned on the high tower, the warm hearth illuminated the faces of two individuals. The comforting fragrance of flowers wafted through the air, while the fairies performed a refreshing opera in the paradise. The floor beneath their feet had transformed into a calm surface of water under Merlin's guidance, upon which the life of a man named Arthur was slowly projected. As the historical turning point unfolded, Merlin sighed softly and pointed to the swaddled infant, saying, "This is the birth of Arthur, the birth of the Red Dragon of Camelot." In the scene, Uther Pendragon, with Merlin's assistance, gave birth to the spark that would sustain Great Britain. Tears of excitement streamed down his aged face as he lifted the infant high and proclaimed, "My child, from the moment you were born, the forests of all Great Britain whispered your name. Arthur Pendragon. I watched you grow day by day, becoming the embodiment of justice. We have always ruled this country with courage and wisdom. I also believe that you will use this power judiciously. True victory lies in inspiring the spirit of struggle within your people. Perhaps one day, my reign will come to an end. And you, by then, will already have been proclaimed king." Is this the entire process from Arthur's birth to his ascension to the throne? How to evaluate this king? She is indeed a noble existence born to be a king, possessing immense strength, noble qualities, and the pure spirit of a knight. Although she may not compare to the omniscient and omnipotent kings like Gilgamesh and Solomon, it is undeniable that she is a qualified king. A king of knights. This is the responsibility bestowed upon Artoria at her birth. As a king, to bear the mission of saving Great Britain. Looking back at the past, Merlin couldn't help but sigh softly and said, "Many of the legends about King Arthur recorded by later generations are fabricated, such as the tale of Arthur's birth. The purpose of Uther's attack on the Duke of Cornwall was not simply due to a mere infatuation with his wife Igraine, as the books suggest, but rather it is an absurd notion that he waged war without reason. As the King of Britain, he would not be foolish enough to deploy national resources for personal desires. On the contrary, he is an excellent king, perhaps even too excellent." Recalling his days of serving Uther, Merlin, as an elder, felt a twinge of nostalgia. It wasn't just for that reason, in the end, did he not take away Igraine? Ahem, that was unavoidable. Uther did this for the stability of Britain. The Duke of Cornwall was an ambitious and powerful lord, inherently a destabilizing factor for Britain. His wife, Igraine, was not an ordinary human. She had once drunk the dragon's blood wine bestowed by the goddess of fate, so she possessed a faint dragon lineage within her. This was why Uther had to obtain her. From the very beginning, her fate was set under the guidance of the goddess. As one with dragon blood, she was destined to be the best mother for Arthur. Only by uniting Uther, who possessed the power of a king, with her could Britain give birth to its greatest glory, Arthur. Thus, Uther had to have her. Then, Merlin continued narrating Uther's final decisions and Britain's ultimate struggles. As the mysteries of Britain began to rapidly dissipate, the gods departed from this land, and even the fantasy beings gradually found it difficult to adapt to the environment, all entering the reverse side of the world. But what would happen when the land favored by the gods suddenly lost its divinity? The foundational mysteries began to crumble rapidly. All of Britain found itself in a state of turbulence, with mysteries fading and agricultural yields declining. The aging Uther could no longer manage the overall situation. The succession of the throne had become an urgent matter. But what kind of king could bear such a situation? So Uther said, if a man won't do, then let it be a dragon. With life and magical energy far exceeding that of humans, the powerful being closest to divinity would certainly have no problem shouldering the burden. Hence, Uther and Merlin devised a plan for the ideal king. Arthur. They killed the Duke of Cornwall, who sought to exploit the power of the Red Dragon to dominate Britain, swiftly captured Igraine, and then let Merlin and other Magus jointly refine her Red Dragon bloodline, enabling Arthur to inherit it perfectly, becoming the ultimate being combining both king and dragon lineage. However, this plan encountered unimaginable discrepancies. The man originally planned suddenly turned into a woman. Artoria was not a boy, and the inherited power of the Red Dragon was not as formidable as expected, falling short of Uther's vision for the ideal king. But with the plan already at this stage, they clearly had no other choice. With a sigh, Merlin continued to recount how he began to nurture this child and guide her to become a king. He also recalled the journey across Britain before she ascended the throne. That ridiculous yet interesting experience still lingered vividly in his memory. Holding the Caliburn, traversing town after town, rescuing suffering people, slaying evil dragons, and continuously winning hearts throughout the journey. The antics of Sir Kay, along with the youthful appearance of Artoria at that time, made that journey truly unforgettable for Merlin. Later, due to the schemes of a certain woman, the Caliburn is broken, and Merlin is forced to borrow, or deceive, the Excalibur from Avalon and give it to Artoria. This act, while granting her greater strength, also burdened her with a heavier mission. Unsurprisingly, with the Excalibur in hand, King Arthur became even more invincible, showcasing her unstoppable power in multiple battles against the Saxons, thoroughly defeating foreign enemies and resolving the issue of foreign invasion in Britain. Afterward, she borrowed Drong Ominiad to defeat the White Dragon of Britain, Vortigern, completing the magnificent achievements of King Arthur. Everything seemed so perfect. Even if she wasn't as powerful as anticipated, she did her best as a king. However, fate ultimately did not spare Britain, nor was it willing to spare this girl who bore it all. With the true ideal king emerging, the entire nation fell into a kind of blindness. They began to blindly trust everything about this king. The king is perfect, the king will not err. As long as they follow the king, there is no need to think too much, and they will attain brilliance and glory. This placed all the pressure and responsibility squarely on the fragile shoulders of Artoria. Along with the incidents involving Lancelot and Guinevere, the matters concerning Mordred ultimately crushed this king. Due to the fading of mystery, the land of Britain became even more barren. In the end, no food could be grown. Yet the military that protected Britain was indispensable. Thus, Artoria resorted to sacrificing the few to save the many, constantly increasing taxes from towns to maintain normalcy. The downside of this method was that it accumulated public resentment, causing her to lose the people's hearts. When these unruly people discovered that the king was not as great as they thought and that she could not save everyone, the scene of the wall collapsing and everyone pushing began to unfold. Since Gilgamesh separated humans from the gods, the destruction of Britain had already become inevitable. Artoria knew this all too well, but all she wanted was a peaceful departure, to quietly leave with all the people of Britain, not to die amidst their turmoil. Recalling Artoria's fate, Merlin's face showed traces of sadness, and it seemed as if something in his chest was aching. I still cannot forget the land trampled by hooves and war, along with the cries of despair and sorrow emitted by that girl. Thus, Britain came to an end. When I saw that expression on Artoria's face, I wondered if I had made a mistake. If I hadn't assisted King Uther in such absurd matters, this girl would not have had to endure so much suffering. This was the first time I experienced human emotions. Regret. Yet even so, this king never gave up on Britain. Even in death, she pursued that miracle. The Holy Grail, even selling herself to Allah, embarking on a tragic cycle of endlessly chasing the Holy Grail. After that, I began to observe every Holy Grail war, continually making influences, sending the scabbard into the world, and choosing a more suitable master for Artoria, just to allow her to achieve redemption. This is also the reason I could observe you in Fuiuki City. But you cannot contend against Hela, even possessing the clairvoyance cannot resist fate. You are likely also under the control of the counterforce. That's right, I cannot deny that. Clairvoyance is merely a trick, not rare in the age of gods, and naturally, it cannot deal with Hela. But did I not find you? Merlin smiled slightly. You are the key. We belong to this world, a part of the Akashic records of this timeline. The trajectory of fate has already formed, and it cannot be resisted. But you are different. Although you are pitifully weak, your status is genuine. Arriving from another record, transcending this timeline's trajectory. Foreigner. Arriving? Roy was momentarily stunned. Of course. To some extent, your status is not inferior to those of outer gods. Although your strength is far from theirs, what they can accomplish, you can as well. Like changing something. I hope you can wake Artoria from this futile dream, letting her realize that the Holy Grail cannot bring salvation, and actively lighten go of her absurd wishes. At this point, Merlin paused and made his request. Even if the means are somewhat crude, it matters not. So you want me to go against the counterforce? Roy looked at him with a face full of disbelief, his mouth twitching involuntarily. I may not fully understand the significance of the foreigner's status, but I'm not a fool. Following your reasoning, I merely exist in a form close to foreigner, without any revolutionary power. Are you urging me to confront the counterforce? Is this a death wish? Hey, I am well aware of that. Rest assured, I will provide the necessary assistance, and you have long been unable to extricate yourself. Merlin smiled faintly, hinting at a conspiracy. What do you mean? Quite simple. This planet is the domain of the counterforce, everything within it is managed in an orderly manner, and you are an outsider who might cause changes here. Do you think the counterforce would trust an existence like you? Merlin shook his head and continued. Of course, if you possessed power equal to those outer gods, capable of easily overturning nature and destroying planets, the counterforce would not easily tear its face to confront you as long as you did not go too far. But you don't, you have status but lack their power, so you are merely a paper tiger. Do you think the counterforce will easily let you off? Roy stared at him seriously. Are you saying that no matter how I evade the world, the counterforce will inevitably act against me? I must face them. Isn't that obvious? After all, no one wants to leave a hidden danger in their own backyard. In this Holy Grail war, if you appear in front of other servants, you will surely face their hostility because they will instinctively develop aversion towards you. You can say you will be surrounded by enemies, and also. As he spoke halfway, Merlin pointed to the calm surface of the water beneath his feet, which rippled once more. In the image, the figure of Magus became clearly visible, currently holding a black book in his hands, wandering around Fuiuki City as if searching for some trace. Magus Tokai Sada? Why is he here? Seeing that boy's figure, Roy could no longer remain calm. He turned his head to look at Merlin and inquired about the reason. Having reached this point, Merlin naturally would not continue to hide, responding, isn't it obvious? His wish is to achieve salvation for all humanity, wanting to transform all humans in the world into similar phantasmal beings, which is tantamount to purifying the world. So a certain counterforce that has never been friendly to humanity greatly likes him, and this time he was chosen as one of the agents. Since ruler has already appeared, I think you should be clearer than I am about the other agent of the counterforce. After listening to Merlin's account, Roy slumped back onto the sofa in silence for a long while before speaking. Then what is the price? Chapter 25, 25 Giritsugu and Saber Giritsugu Emiya, known as the Magus Killer, is considered a disgrace in the Magus community. With a horrifying record of hunting down hundreds of Magus, he is regarded as a dangerous figure in the moonlit world. Yet, at this moment, such an outstanding individual feels an overwhelming sense of sorrow. The pale-faced man, with blood trickling from the corners of his mouth, endures excruciating pain throughout his paralyzed body. The agony contorts his expression into a grimace, and if he could, he would want to smoke a cigarette to calm himself. However, his equally disheveled servant, Artoria, who is dragging him with a handcart, clearly doesn't understand his intentions. The master and servant, one struggling to drag, the other lying helplessly, make their way through the small grove. Seeing that Saber has no intention of assisting him, Giritsugu sighs, enduring the pain as he raises his already paralyzed hand to grope for a cigarette in his pocket, then lights it using magecraft. The man named Giritsugu Emiya smokes a cigarette while recalling the tragic battle. This fight can only be described as a total defeat. First, from the master's perspective, Giritsugu exchanged half of his life for crucial intelligence yesterday. He encountered a lord from the clock tower, specifically the lord of the Department of Mineralogy, Kamathelmeloi Archibald, one of the highest figures in the mysterious world. Although the Innsburn Patriarch had informed him beforehand that two opponents were Orthodox Magus from the clock tower, he never expected a lord would appear, and a particularly outrageous one at that. Typically, a noble like Kenneth, a lord-level figure from the clock tower, would be exceedingly proud. As a Magus, his arrogance would far exceed that of other Magus, and when facing opponents far beneath his level in magecraft, he would undoubtedly look down upon them and refuse to use his full strength, making the arrogant mistake of underestimating his enemies. Giritsugu only needed to seize a moment of Kenneth's carelessness to take him down, The secret of the origin bullet was a surefire kill against these Magus. However, for some reason, this guy seemed to have been stimulated. Attending a rural magical ceremony, he was completely armed from head to toe with mystic codes. Defense, decoys, concealment. Various psychic codes that could be said to cover everything that could save his life. What's worse, this guy never truly revealed himself. Even when he located Garetsugu, he didn't use his real body but sent out high-level magical puppets that could pass for him to test Garetsugu. After enduring a fierce life and death struggle, and paying the price of his current state, Garetsugu finally confirmed that he had hit the origin bullet into Kenneth's body. He felt the relief of a victor, only for the next moment to see another Kenneth appear around the corner. At that moment, his heart shattered. Recalling the events of last night, he had used his severe injuries as bait, pretending to be driven into a corner and launching a crazy, unstructured counterattack, even using modern gadgets. Garetsugu, with his pitifully low magical achievements, had naturally received Kenneth's disdain. To seize this golden opportunity, Garetsugu even risked his life to unleash a terrifying five-fold acceleration of his time altar, quickly closing the distance, then throwing a flashbang in Kenneth's face, and finally firing the origin bullet for a surprise shot. The plan was excellent, and its execution went smoothly, showcasing Garetsugu's selfless determination, clever mind, and astonishing explosive power with the five-fold acceleration. With all these advantages combined, along with the surprise of the flashbang and origin bullet, Garetsugu successfully killed Kenneth. Or rather, his decoy. When he saw Kenneth start to convulse and fall to the ground, Garetsugu smiled. Although the price he paid was a bit high, he had succeeded in driving away this greatest threat, the Lord of the Department of Mineralogy. It was worth it. Then Kenneth laughed too. Although he had wasted the expensive high-level magical puppet he had bought from that woman, he had also figured out Garetsugu's magecraft and the origin bullet, removing a huge risk for himself. That was worth it too. In the situation where both sides felt they had profited, it was clear that Kenneth had gained more. So, amid Garetsugu's relieved laughter, Kenneth applauded him, and then walked out from another corner completely unharmed, leaving Garetsugu dumbfounded. Taking a deep drag from his cigarette, Garetsugu felt utterly dejected. That damned Lord of the Department of Mineralogy was clearly powerful but had been so cautious that he left no way out for his opponent. If it hadn't been for that white-haired boy in priest clothing interrupting the battle last night, he would have been cut to pieces by Kenneth's mercury sword by now. On the other side, Artoria wasn't in much better shape than Garetsugu. Last night, she had also suffered a harsh defeat. First, she was tricked by Fion, leading her to challenge them on his home turf, almost drowning in the seawater. Then, the Gilgamesh who showed up next looked down on her completely, his gaze filled with disdain as if he were looking at some inferior counterfeit. The subsequent appearance of the Black Knight and Iskander didn't make things easier. After their conversation, the Black Knight suddenly attacked her furiously, forcing her into yet another humiliating battle. However, the good news was that she had roughly grasped the situation of the other factions last night. First was the Lancer with golden hair, whose combat skills was unfathomable and who excelled at using the power of water. Whether in battle or healing, he was outstanding. After fighting for so long, the injuries and exhaustion she suffered were healed by him using a bottle of mineral water for a remarkably effective healing spell. While she was left exhausted and dirty, he was completely unharmed. He could both deal damage and heal. Truly a cheat. Without using a noble phantasm, she had no confidence in defeating him. Then there was Rider Iskander, who introduced himself to everyone and invited her to join his ranks. Although he seemed hot-blooded and reckless, the pressure from such a top-tier servant couldn't be ignored. Next came Archer, whose arrogant demeanor left a deep impression on her. He didn't conceal anything, clearly treating everyone present as trash, seemingly intending to take down everyone. Of course, the power he demonstrated in easily suppressing the Black Knight made it clear to everyone that he was a top-tier servant. The Black Knight was no slouch either, and she, having experienced his strength firsthand, understood this best. If it weren't for the first night, when no one wanted to rush into battle, she figured she would have had a hard time getting out of the harbor last night. After this night, the master and servant were both exhausted, but Garetsugu knew he couldn't rest yet. He had many issues to deal with. He needed to track down the whereabouts of the still-hidden assassin and caster. Who was the boy priest that had helped him last night? What were his motives? And how should he deal with Kenneth and the other masters? There were just too many things to handle, and he needed to formulate a plan quickly. He had to get back to the base for treatment. Time wouldn't allow him to delay any longer. Garetsugu exhaled the cigarette butt from his mouth and instructed Saber, "Faster, Saber." Looking at the sample of the origin bullet collected in the test tube, Kenneth let out a breath, still feeling a lingering fear. After several hours of research, he had fully understood the secret of the Magus killer. The clever combination of fire and earth, combined with the properties of Garetsugu, Although the craftsmanship is very crude, the power of this composite attribute is still terrifying. Garetsuguamiya. It's unexpected that someone would actually write their greatest secret in their name. No wonder the magical puppet and substitutes collapse the moment they come into contact with this bullet. Now it's time for questions. May I ask this Elmeloy too, what will happen if a Magus is hit by this bullet? Glancing at the trembling Waver Velvet, Kenneth asked, a bit irritated. I know. Ryder, who had been sitting beside them for a while, suddenly clapped his hands as if realizing something. Nothing will happen, because it gets cut and then reconnected. This is really simple. Kenneth twitched his mouth. This idiot. Foolish Ryder, if it had no effect, how could Professor be so wary of this thing? Waver shook his head, saying irritably. Do you think everyone is as stupid as you? Isn't it wrong? Iskander scratched his head, mumbling, but I'm not a Magus, how could I understand this kind of thing? Then don't ramble on. Professor, the bullet's effect is to disrupt and reconnect, right? If hit by this bullet, the Magus's magic circuits will be disrupted at the moment of operation and then violently reconnected. Waver quickly thought of the answer. Correct. This thing indeed has that effect, and its power is quite terrifying. Kenneth nodded. That's truly frightening. Waver's face turned pale. A small bullet could easily doom a Magus. This kind of weapon instinctively filled him with fear. Huh? What's wrong with that? Isn't cutting and reconnecting a good thing? Where did I go wrong? Iskander scratched his head in confusion. As expected. This guy is a fool. King of Conquerors, you are mistaken. Think about it, although it will be reconnected, the location will be disordered. For ordinary people, this is similar to vascular disarray, misconnected blood vessels will hinder normal blood flow. For Magus, it's like replacing their magic circuits with blood vessels. Fian, who had been silent, finally spoke up. Yes, vascular disarray means death, so if a Magus is hit by this, they will die, right? Iskander stroked his chin, finally coming up with the answer. That's right. If a Magus is hit by this, all their magic circuits will be violently tangled together, which is not much different from direct death. Waver nodded, acknowledging Iskander's answer. Oh, so this small thing is actually this terrifying? It can easily kill a Magus? This really surprises me. Iskander exclaimed. Yes, this excessive thing is simply a nemesis for Magus. Waver said with trepidation. It is undeniable that it is indeed so, but you don't have to worry too much. With those few meager, inferior magic circuits in you, even if you're hit by this bullet, you wouldn't suffer much damage, you won't die. Waver twitched at the corner of his mouth. Thank you for that reassurance. But Master, doesn't this thing pose a significant danger to you? After all, your magic circuits are. Don't worry about me, Lancer. If I didn't know about it, then indeed, I might have fallen into his trap, capsizing in the gutter. Kenneth smiled confidently. But now that I know his hidden secret, this thing poses no threat to me anymore. An origin bullet, such an important piece of information, only cost me 2 high-level magical puppet in exchange. This deal is worth it. It's truly worth it. Kenneth smiled, looking meaningfully at Waver beside him. Waver, I should also thank you. If it weren't for your conversation with Lord Zelrech reminding me, I wouldn't have prepared so thoroughly for this battle. Professor Humphrey, don't be too happy too soon. In light of this matter, I won't hold you and Ryder's reckless actions against you. After the Holy Grail War ends, go back and write a 50,000-word reflection. Eh? What's all of the noise about? Aren't you good at writing reflections? If you think 50,000 is too little, then write 100,000. Yes. Waver said with a mournful face. Ha ha ha, isn't his great? It's all settled easily. Iskander laughed heartily. Watch closely, Waver. Kenneth said with a slight smile, witness how the true Elmeloy turns the Magus killer's greatest secret into a joke. Lancer. Master, what are your orders? Go to the Fuiuki City Police Station and acquire some bulletproof vests and explosive shields. Next time we meet, I want to completely crush that despicable Magus killer. Understood. Fian transformed into light and departed. Chapter 26, 26 Mystic Code. Not bad. You've practiced enough in such a short time to show some real skill. I must commend you, you truly have a talent for illusion magecraft. As Merlin assessed the situation, he stood up. Watching the swarms of blue butterflies dancing before him, he couldn't help but praise Roy's training speed. Although I have imparted all my knowledge about illusions to you through dreams, it's still quite surprising that you could achieve this level in just one night. Merlin stroked his chin in thought. Have you ever encountered illusion magecraft before? No, I only began to study it a few months after receiving my magic crest. After all, for me, illusion magecraft requires the least mana and is the easiest to trigger. Least mana and easiest to trigger, indeed. Since the butterflies in butterfly magecraft inherently possess illusionary qualities, and the knowledge stored in your magic crest also includes my contributions, it is indeed the best choice for you. However, the speed at which you grasp it is still quite fast. What exactly is going on? Feeling something was amiss, Merlin pondered for a moment but ultimately chose to attribute it to talent. You did very well today, especially for a human. Merlin smiled and leaned closer, gazing intently at his face. However, I still have some doubts. What is it? Although I had a strange feeling from the very beginning, it wasn't so profound. The more I interacted with you, the stranger it felt. I keep sensing that your soul is somewhat mottled as if mixed with some foreign substance. I can't quite put this feeling into words. Foreign substance? What do you mean? Are you saying something has mixed into my soul? Will this affect me? It's hard to say. It could be due to the uniqueness of the foreigner, or perhaps some other reason. I'm not sure about the specifics. After all, I'm only meeting you in dreams right now. To understand your true condition, I would need to examine you in person. But since you've been living for so long without any issues, there shouldn't be anything to worry about, at least not in the short term. Shouldn't there be? Roy stared blankly at the unreliable Merlin, a look of skepticism on his face. Don't look at me with such distrust. This is something I can't help with. Even though I have clairvoyance, I can only see the present, I can't see the future, and I certainly can't discern the essence. Just being able to detect the anomaly in your soul is quite impressive. If we let Gilgamesh and Solomon take a look, they should be able to find something. Their clairvoyance is more effective than mine. Gilgamesh and Solomon? Are you sure I'll come back alive after meeting Gilgamesh? After the Holy Grail War ends, you should go to the clock tower and mention my name to Kisser Zelrach Schwenorg. He'll help you take a look. Although he's somewhat unreliable himself, his magical prowess is still quite formidable. I have a decent relationship with him. Kisser Zelrach Schwenorg. The old man of the jewel, the magician of the second magic, and someone who took down Crimson Moon. He certainly knows this formidable magician. However, magicians in the moonlit world tend to be somewhat eccentric. The more outstanding the magicians, the more troubled they often are. Zelrach's biggest interest is magical girls. He enjoys transforming young, beautiful girls into his ideal magical girls. Essentially, he is quite a despicable person. If it were him, he might indeed be able to help. But is it possible that scum like Merlin is actually friends with him? Truly, birds of a feather flock together. It seems that scum is drawn to scum. I can't shake the feeling that you're thinking something quite rude. I'm not. I was just thinking that you're quite scummy. How terrifying. You can say such outrageous things without batting an eye. Hey. Roy chuckled softly. Do you care about your reputation? After all, your name is known in Britain and even in the Throne of Heroes as that of a scum. Not at all as exaggerated as you say. Even in Britain, I'm quite beloved. Don't look at me with that insect-like gaze. I admit my reputation is indeed a bit poor, but that's not important. As he spoke, Merlin waved his hand dismissively. Don't worry, I will enter your dreams on time every day to teach you and provide the information I've gathered with my clairvoyance to support you. Although I'm better at swordsmanship than incantations, which can be cumbersome and may even bite my tongue, guiding a novice magus like you is no problem. However, please be prepared, as my upcoming guidance will not be easy. I certainly understand that there's no way to gain power without effort in this world. With rewards, there must be sacrifices. Roy was fully aware of the adage that there are no free lunches. Even heroes in mythology receive blessings and powers from the gods, which are typically marked with a price. Very good, you seem quite spirited. Next, I will use a stricter approach than with Artoria to hone you into a true hero. Be prepared, young man. Merlin laughed, but this time his smile was not the flippant one from before, it was a genuinely happy grin, like a child who had just received a new toy. It's just uncertain how long this newly acquired toy can keep him entertained. Go back and think about your magical development plan. This is important for you. He woke up. The next day, Roy woke up from his warm bed and stretched against the morning sun. However, the surroundings were no longer the dilapidated hideout of the Fujimura group, but rather a luxurious and warm exquisite room, likely a nice hotel. It's morning. Just about to say good morning, but you've been asleep for 10 hours, it's already 9 o'clock. The Count leaned back in his chair, looking quite spirited, as servants do not require rest. Have I really slept that long? But my mind still feels so tired. There was no help for it, although his body had rested last night, his soul had trained with Merlin in the dream world for the entire night. While he had physically rested, the mental fatigue did not dissipate, which was causing Roy a headache, in the physical sense. Although he wanted to go back to sleep, this was not the time for it during the Holy Grail War, so he naturally couldn't allow himself to continue lazing around. By the way, where is this place, Count? Wasn't I supposed to be sleeping in the agreed-upon warehouse? Glancing lightly at Roy, the Count replied, that place has already been compromised. This is the Hyatt Hotel, I brought you here for the night. A hotel? Wait, what did you say this was? A sudden bad feeling arose in his heart. My lord, is everything going smoothly? In the spacious room, Fiant stepped forward to ask as he watched Kenneth come out of the workshop, looking radiant. Humphrey, of course, it was completed. For the true MLOI, cracking such petty tricks is a piece of cake. Kenneth smiled confidently, then called forth Waver, who had been his assistant all night and was now utterly exhausted. Yes. Professor Kenneth. In a weak voice, Waver stepped out of the workshop, his face marked with dark circles. Compared to Kenneth's current radiance, he looked like he was on the verge of burning out. However, Kenneth didn't mind. Not every Magus has the privilege of attending a one-on-one lecture with a Lord-level instructor who talks for an entire night. The effort Waver had put in was negligible compared to the knowledge gained. After last night's study, he found that Waver wasn't as bothersome as before. Although he had mediocre bloodlines and poor magic circuits, the boy's understanding of magical theory indeed surprised him. The questions he posed were surprisingly answered with ease, and Waver even offered his own insights. Compared to Kenneth's practical approach, Waver seemed more like a theoretical researcher. He might be better suited for a place like the Clock Tower or perhaps the Wandering Sea or Atlas Institute. Kid, is this outfit the result of your all-night study? Iskander curiously tugged at Waver's new coat. Yes, this is a special mystic code made by Professor Kenneth. The entire outfit is sewn from bulletproof material and integrates many magical materials, with sufficient magical restrictions and auxiliary capabilities set into it. As for functionality, it can utilize the internal mercury garment to regulate body temperature and deceive night vision devices. Its own durability, combined with an automatic counterattack technique, prevents bullets from penetrating. It can defend against Garrett Sugumiya's sniping. By the way, it's also equipped with a Thunder-type mystic codes that can simulate pulses, which can disable any high-precision equipment present. It also considers protection against fire, cold, sand, and so on. While Waver spoke, he demonstrated the capabilities of this anti-Garrett Sugu armor to Iskander. Oh, this really is an impressive piece. If this amazing clothing could be mass-produced for the army, wouldn't it be invincible? Iskander rubbed his chin, seriously envisioning it. This thing is far superior to what I've seen in books about bulletproof vests and blast armor. It's decided. Every soldier in my future army will need a set. It's not as simple as you think, idiot. This is a mystic code, and quite a high-level one at that. Waver rolled his eyes at him, feeling utterly speechless. Not to mention the magical materials used for enhancing the enchantments, just the craftsmanship involved makes it impossible for most Magus to tackle. This is a composite mystic code that only top-tier Magus can create. Where do you plan to find lords to keep producing it for you? After the flashy demonstration, the functions of the outfit were finally all revealed. Fireproof, waterproof, bulletproof, able to interfere with night vision devices, and capable of disabling high-precision equipment. It could be said that this was the nemesis of Garrett Sugumiya and even modern technology as a whole. If not for the outrageous craftsmanship and cost required for its creation, this absurd mystic code could indeed influence the global military system if it were widely distributed. After assisting last night, he began to comprehend the arrogance Iskander had spoken of. If it were him, even if he knew the principle behind the origin bullets, he would only know the method, without any idea of how to counteract them. But Professor Kenneth, in just one night, had created a nearly perfect countermeasure mystic code. The gap was too large. No matter how much dissatisfaction he had to admit that Kenneth completely outclassed him, both academically and in action. His previous desire to rebut him might have truly been the pinnacle of arrogance. What's the matter, Waver Velvet? Noticing Waver's dejection, Kenneth let out a cold snort. Are you going to give up just because you've witnessed the gap between yourself and a true genius? If your capacity is only this much, then I truly overestimated you. Since you have the potential to become an MLOI, you must seize that potential. Even if it's just a little, you must not disgrace this great surname. Do you understand? Seeing Kenneth's stern gaze, Waver wasn't afraid. He responded firmly. Professor. I haven't given up, I definitely won't give up. No matter how much you dislike me, I'll never give up. Someday, I will prove to you the value of my thesis. Ha ha ha, kid, that's exactly how my master should be. You might lose, but you can't lose your fighting spirit. Never give up your heart of conquest. Ryder. Will you help me? Of course. After all, you are my little master. Who else would I help? When I win the Holy Grail, I'll take you with me to conquer this world. Ha ha ha. Veins bulged on Kenneth's forehead. This rude rider had once again interrupted his sacred time for lecturing and even had the nerve to ignore him, starting a conversation off to the side. But against someone like Iskander, the king of conquerors, who feared nothing, there wasn't much he could do. As a historically renowned king, it was natural for him to have arrogance and act on his own accord. But this personality truly made Kenneth's blood pressure spike. Compared to this guy, his own summon lancer seemed infinitely better. Both were famous top-tier heroic spirits, yet the difference between them was immense. Kenneth sighed and then said in a deep voice, "In light of your attentiveness last night, you can keep wearing that mystic code for protection." "Really?" Waver looked at Kenneth in disbelief. He had witnessed the entire process of creating this outfit and knew how expensive it was. It wasn't something a commoner magus like himself could even dream of possessing. Now, his teacher, who had always been at odds with him, was offering it to him. He couldn't believe it. "Humphrey, wear it, Waver Velvet. As my student, even if you are the worst of my students, I can't allow you to be killed by those barbaric country magus and disgrace the name of the Elmeloy classroom, understand?" Kenneth's voice grew louder as he sternly warned. "Keep yourself alive. Don't act recklessly, and conduct yourself as a student worthy of the Elmeloy classroom." "Yes, Professor Kenneth." Waver, startled, reflexively answered. "Good. Now that you understand, take your exhausted body out of my sight. In your current state, you'll only hold me back in tonight's battle." "Okay, understood. Thank you, Professor." Chapter 27, 27G Sits a Dream. The dark dungeon had become a paradise for rats and maggots, with heart-wrenching wails echoing in his ears at all times. This scene was very familiar to Roy. He had returned to the prison tower once again, but this time, the protagonist was not himself, but rather him. Watching the disheveled man imprisoned deep within the dungeon, Roy instinctively wanted to reach out to him, but he hesitated. He saw the injured man trembling as he crawled up, his eyes devoid of any confusion, with a flame burning in his gaze. Until the man turned away, gradually fading into the darkness, leaving behind a murmured phrase. "Wait, and keep hope in your heart." Roy awakened from his dream and felt a bead of cold sweat trickle down his forehead as he nervously looked up, fearing that Lancer might suddenly burst out from the ceiling. At the Hyatt Hotel, he knew this was the most luxurious hotel in all of Fuiuki City, and it was also Kenneth's lair. Was the Count really bringing him into someone else's magical workshop? Noticing Roy's unease, the Count spoke calmly, "There's no need to be nervous. Although we're very close, the building where that magical workshop is located is not connected to here. We've hidden ourselves well. As long as we don't use magecraft here, we won't be discovered." Upon hearing the Count's words, Roy sensed something. He got up and pulled back the curtains, immediately spotting the larger and more luxurious main building of the hotel across the street. Moreover, there was a powerful magical aura emanating from the top floor of that building, which he could clearly perceive. Goodness, how audacious. Having figured out the situation, he guessed that Kenneth, with his noble arrogance, would certainly choose the most luxurious main building as his stronghold, completely disregarding the side building where he was. This was a classic case of darkness under the lamp. While Kenneth was brazen enough to expose his magical workshop, he could never have imagined that there was a magus even more arrogant than him, daring to hide close to his own magical workshop. But being this close was rather thrilling. The first night had already passed. Thanks to a certain incubus, he had grasped the situation of this Holy Grail war, but there were still at least 6 days and nights to go. According to the intel, the depth of this Holy Grail war was clearly beyond his expectations. The counter-guardians had already appeared, and what was worse, they all held hostility toward him. Except for the disgraceful assassin team, all the servants present were top tier. With his current combat strength, he wouldn't survive the Holy Grail war, let alone complete his tasks. Was the Count strong? Very strong. A solid top-tier servant, with speed that was also top-notch. But he couldn't match the other servants in this war. Gilgamesh needed no further introduction. He was the servant killer and the strongest in this entire war. Fian, the unparalleled leader of the Knights of Fianna of Erin, was not much weaker than Gilgamesh. Each of Iskander and Artoria were top-tier servants. In a direct confrontation, the Count wouldn't stand a chance against any of them. He hadn't shown himself last night, but Tokiomi Tasaka and Kairiko Tamine were very aware of him. Other groups of servants wouldn't easily let Castor off the hook either, because the most troublesome servant in the Holy Grail war wasn't the one with the strongest overall abilities, Saber, nor the long-range sniper archer with nuclear blast capabilities, but rather the seemingly least destructive Castor. Because everyone was a magus, they all had an idea. If only modern servants were summoned as Castor, it would be one thing. But what if a Age of Gods Castor appeared? Wouldn't that be a scenario where Age of Gods Magecraft could make everyone dance in circles, and silently strike at the Greater Grail without anyone noticing? Just thinking about battling others to the death, only to find that the Holy Grail was already seized by someone else in secret, was enough to give him a brain bleed. So everyone present was very wary of the caster who had yet to appear last night. They were probably all conducting searches by now. If that were the case, it would be fine. While they were taking risks, they could directly target the Holy Grail and allay lines to increase their chances of victory. However, what Roy had to consider was that they weren't caster at all, they just appeared as caster in others' eyes. Looking at the Count beside him, Roy raised his hand and reached into the air, using the detection magecraft he had just learned. Then he saw a shocking scene. Merlin caster strength, B endurance, E agility, D mana, A luck, C, whoa. Seeing the Count's outrageous status, Roy took a sharp breath and exclaimed, goodness. Was he actually guarding against his own master? Merlin had completely disguised the Count's status using magecraft, fully cloaking it to deceive others. If that scoundrel Magus were to use Ruler's ability to check the Count's information, he would definitely suffer a major setback in battle. Count, let's go. Where to? The Count furrowed his brows and asked, don't you want to stay and rest for a while? After all, your condition isn't exactly great. I don't need to anymore. Roy jumped down from the bed and looked out the window at the sun that was already high in the sky. The night is the battlefield for servants, the daytime is my stage. Although I may not be a competent master, I still want to help you as much as I can. Since he had already been labeled as caster, he might as well fully embrace the mischievous nature of caster. Now was the time not to slack off, he had to take action. If he continued to sit idly by, his only fate would be to head toward destruction. First, he needed to stir up this murky water thoroughly and find a chance to steer the situation in the direction most favorable to him. So it was time to. Let's go, Count. Understood. Your expression really resembles that of a prisoner about to face the death penalty. The Count teased while smoking. You're clearly terrified, yet you still want to go in? While I may not know much about Magus, I can sense that this building is quite unusual. Yeah, after all, it's a magical workshop set up by a lord of the clock tower. Even a servant inside would probably not fare well. Roy gazed at the towering building before him. This was a magical workshop, and a remarkably rigorous one at that, completely exposed to everyone's view without any intention of hiding. It showcased a blatant attitude of I'm right here, come in and fight me if you dare. Shouldn't it be expected of Kenneth? He had the arrogance of a top-tier Magus written all over his face. Even acknowledging the power of the servants, he still made such a decision. He was too confident in his magical prowess, but unfortunately, he had encountered someone like Garrett Suguemiya, a Magus killer who disregarded all ethics. Explosives to the face, with no intention of breaking the formation quietly. Of course we have to go in. How else can we pull in powerful reinforcements? Oh? Why do you think the Magus of this magical workshop will cooperate with us? The Count asked with some confusion. Do you know him well? Yes, I know him very well. Roy spoke frankly about the reason. Because I've seen everything. Everything, huh? He really said it. His secret. Krahahaha, that's quite a good answer, Master. The Count chuckled, flicking away the almost burnt-out cigarette butt. Since you've said so, let's go in and take a look. Just remember not to stray too far from me. I know. Entering someone else's magical workshop was like stepping into their territory. One's own strength would weaken within, while the enemy's would be enhanced. Everything inside would be controlled by the opponent, and one might unwittingly meet their demise. Though he was just a hastily trained Magus, Roy still had the discernment to recognize this, so he certainly didn't plan to force his way in but rather aimed for a sincere exchange. Hello, could you please pass this letter to Mr. Kenneth, who is staying at this hotel? I am his friend. He greeted the front desk staff and, while doing so, sent a few butterflies flying in front of her, gradually completing the mental suggestion magecraft to erode her thoughts. Sure, sir, please wait a moment. With the help of the suggestion magecraft, the staff member very cooperatively sent someone to deliver the letter to Kenneth on the top floor. After a while, a classical handsome man with golden long hair slowly descended the stairs, his graceful figure attracting the attention of the crowd. Lord Kenneth requests your presence upstairs. Thank you for leading the way. As he followed Fion into the corridor, Roy felt a certain gaze watching him closely from the shadows. If he made any unusual movements, Kenneth would immediately suppress him. However, he had indeed come with sincerity this time, and his bargaining chips were substantial enough to even move Kenneth, the Lord. Plus, since it was his magical workshop, Kenneth didn't think there would be any surprises and agreed to meet with him. When he pushed open the last door, a magnificent hall adorned with gold and splendor revealed itself to Roy, every inch exuding the scent of money. Evil capitalism. Roy protested in his heart, though he still politely said, Sorry for the intrusion. Upon entering the room, he saw Kenneth, dressed in classical attire, sitting on a sofa savoring a cup of red tea. Truly a nobleman. He couldn't help but sigh slightly as he looked at Kenneth and said, "Nice to meet you, esteemed Lord Kenneth Elmeloy Archibald. Though my visit is a bit abrupt, I sincerely apologize. It's an urgent matter that I can only meet you in this manner." A little brat has mixed into the Holy Grail War? Kenneth's face was filled with the arrogance and disdain of the noble. Roy didn't mind Kenneth's rude behavior. The arrogance of Magus was ingrained in their nature, especially for a noble Magus like Kenneth, whose arrogance was even more pronounced. "Though it's a bit sudden, may I ask, esteemed Lord Elmeloy, since you've chosen to invite me to meet, it means you agree to this transaction, correct?" A precious magic crest that has been passed down for hundreds of years is indeed very tempting. I believe no Magus would have reason to refuse such a generous offer. However, why should I believe that a mere ordinary person like you can present such a treasure? So, prove it to me. All right. Upon hearing Kenneth's request, Roy didn't refuse. He activated his magecraft, causing the magic crest on his arm to appear. Is this sufficient? The quality of this magic crest is quite high, and it has been preserved very well. It truly is a precious item passed down for hundreds of years. Where did this come from? Such an ancient magic crest must have originated from a long-established Magus family. How did it end up in the hands of a mundane like you? Seeing the magic crest materialize on Roy's arm, Kenneth couldn't help but frown. He could naturally recognize the value of the Mata family's magic crest, but the more he saw, the more puzzled he became. Why would someone give up such a precious magic crest just for such a small request? What was he really scheming? This is a magic crest from Magus Elgin, and as for how I got it. A few months ago, my servant and I killed Matuskin and took it. Matuskin? I remember he is the head of the Mata family, a Magus family in Fuiuki City. What is his connection to Magus Elgin? Kenneth asked, slightly frowning in confusion, pointing to the chair in front of him, signaling Roy to sit down for a detailed discussion. Seeing this, Roy didn't hesitate and graciously took a seat in front of Kenneth, beginning to recount the events of the past few months. From the spontaneous summoning of the heroic spirit to connecting magic circuits and becoming a Magus, to eliminating Matuskin, and so forth. So, you're just an ordinary person who accidentally became a Magus through a series of fortunate misunderstandings. No wonder you can easily give up such a precious crest. It seems you truly don't understand its value. Kenneth said after hearing the story. With Roy's intentional guidance, Kenneth successfully misinterpreted him as a novice just starting out in the Magus path. Only this way could he explain Roy's easy abandonment of the magic crest. Thinking carefully about the conditions mentioned in Roy's letter, Kenneth frowned and asked, "The value of this magic crest far exceeds your imagination. You could even use this crest as a foundation to establish a new Magus family. Yet you are using it as a bargaining chip for something so trivial. What exactly is your goal?" Understanding Kenneth's doubts, Roy shook his head helplessly and explained, "My only goal from the beginning has been to have you, Lord Elmeloy, become my teacher. If you're unwilling to believe me, we can establish a self-imposed magical contract." "A self-imposed magical contract? Are you sure about that?" Kenneth's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. A magical contract is similar to an agreement, where both Magus write the terms of the contract on a magical scroll and sign it together, creating a binding effect. What Roy proposed was an even more binding self-imposed magical contract. The so-called self-imposed contract is a type of magical contract used by Magus when establishing an agreement that absolutely cannot be breached, serving as the most absolute guarantee against a breach of contract. The contract is written on parchment and includes details such as binding techniques, subjects being bound, the formal content of the oath, conditions for fulfilling the oath, and signatures of the parties involved. Both parties use their own magic crests to impose the curse of Geese upon the practitioner, which cannot be nullified by any means in principle. Once the Magus signs the contract and fulfills the conditions to make it effective, even if the signatory dies, as long as the magic crest is inherited by the next generation, even the spirit after death will be bound. If this contract is signed, it means this kid is serious. I'm very sure, I am willing to sign the self-imposed contract, and the content will be exactly as stated in the previous letter. Roy replied with a very certain tone, extending his finger. First, Kenneth Elmeloy Archibald must take me as his apprentice and teach me magecraft diligently, without leaving out anything. Second, Kenneth Elmeloy Archibald must guarantee my safety during the Holy Grail War and ensure that I do not suffer harm from other servants. Third, in return, Roy and his servant are prohibited from causing any harm to Kenneth Elmeloy Archibald during the Holy Grail War. Fourth, upon Roy's death, all of his magical assets must be transferred to Kenneth Elmeloy Archibald, including the magic crest and his body. These 4 mandatory clauses meant that Kenneth only needed to accept Roy as his disciple and make every effort to ensure his safety during the Holy Grail War. In return, Roy was effectively selling himself to Kenneth, promising to transfer his magical legacy to the Almeloy family after his death. For Kenneth, this contract might bring him some minor troubles, but compared to the cost Roy was offering, these troubles were negligible. For me, I only need to pay a trivial price to gain an original Magus and a long-established magic crest. I really have no reason to refuse such a transaction. Seeing Kenneth's interest, Roy chose to strike while the iron was hot, smiling as he looked at him and said, "Indeed, Lord Almeloy, you only need to pay a trivial price to obtain a precious magic crest and eliminate an enemy completely. What are you still hesitating about?" At this point, Kenneth was not a hesitant person. He replied seriously, "All right, since you've brought this to my doorstep, I'll grant your wish. Remember your choice today and don't regret it. Thank you for your advice, but I never regret the choices I make." Chapter 28, 28 Teacher and Student. The contract has been drafted, sign it. Kenneth moved swiftly. After receiving the parchment Fian brought, he completed the contract within a few minutes. Kenneth then pushed the parchment filled with densely packed text towards Roy, signaling him to sign. Glancing at the dense text, Roy simply tossed the contract scroll to the Count. "Caster, check if the essay has any loopholes for me." "You're illiterate?" Kenneth frowned. "What do you mean illiterate?" "I just want to make sure it's clear." Ignoring their banter, the Count took the contract and carefully examined it, scrutinizing each clause multiple times. After confirming there were no issues, he returned the scroll to Roy. "No problems, Master." "I see." Hearing this, Roy nodded, then took a small knife from his pocket, cut his finger, and signed his name in blood on the parchment. As the magical engraving and contract completed their connection, Roy could feel a special rule descend upon him, signifying the contract's activation. Kenneth, who also sensed the contract take effect on him, snorted coldly and retrieved the scroll from the table. "Humphrey, whatever your intentions are, the contract is now signed. You no longer have any opportunity to meddle. I've explained countless times. I never had such plans in the first place." With a wry smile, Roy stood and approached Kenneth, extending his hand. "Now that the contract is in place, I hope you will guide me well in the days to come, Professor Kenneth. Don't get too excited too soon, kid. My guidance is very strict. Are you sure you can handle it? Bring it on. Your spirit's not bad. Don't just stand there like a fool, follow me. Let me check your magic circuits." The development of circuits in first-generation Magus usually has some problems. "Understood." After instructing Fian to guard the workshop, Kenneth led Roy into his workshop. "Are you really Merlin?" Meanwhile, Fian, who was stationed outside, was staring at the Count with a face full of doubt. He couldn't help but suck on his thumb a few times. His divine wisdom had already made him aware that something was off. During his life, he had heard of the legendary Magus of Flowers, and though he could sense the aura of flowers from the heroic spirit in front of him, beneath that vibrant sea of flowers seemed to lurk something unclean. A hidden, suppressed aura that felt like a curse, a grudge. "I am not that incubus. This aura is just a disguise." Seeing that Fian had seen through him, the Count admitted it calmly. "I cannot reveal my true name to you. Disclosing this much information is already my utmost sincerity, Lancer. Apologies, I was being rude, prying into your secrets, Caster. Since we're on the same side, I look forward to fighting alongside you in the upcoming battles." Fian smiled dryly and candidly apologized for his intrusion. "Though I don't know your true name, I can sense that flame. Caster, your power is undoubtedly formidable. Once we've eliminated all our enemies, I truly hope to have a good, hearty battle with you. You're eager for the Holy Grail?" The Count raised an eyebrow. Fian nodded and said, "While my desire for the Holy Grail isn't great, I merely wish to change this life of being cursed with romantic misfortune. You can see my beautiful face, right? You should understand how many tragedies have been caused by this beauty. Ha ha ha, so that's your wish, Lancer." Sensing the unfamiliar magical presence, Iskander burst out laughing as he walked out of the room, suddenly inserting himself into their conversation. "A Lancer cursed with romantic misfortune? I remember my little master teaching me some knowledge about Celtic mythology. Let me think. Oh. I've got it." Iskander clapped his left hand hard onto his right. "You must be Dirmudadduabn, right? Ha ha, I see. No wonder your martial skills are so impressive." There was no doubt that upon hearing this name, Fian's face twisted slightly, while the Count appeared utterly speechless. Both of them thought this servant might not be entirely right in the head. "And what about you, Caster? Don't you have any desire for the Holy Grail?" "My wish is to obtain the Grail, gain a new body, and resume my conquest in this era." Iskander declared. The Holy Grail? The Count suddenly burst into laughter, as if he'd heard a joke. Relying on the Grail to fulfill my destiny or wishes is not my style. I'll only help my master obtain the Grail, and how to use it will be entirely up to him. Fian muttered to himself, you're doing it just for your master? Such selflessness puts me to shame. Ha ha ha. You're truly a refreshing person. Although I don't know who you are, I'm lucky to have met both of you in this Holy Grail war. Iskander laughed heartily. You have quite an abundant supply of magical energy, and the quality of your magic circuits is excellent. The conversion rate is also very high. Although first-generation Magus typically have fewer circuits, your magical aptitude is undeniably exceptional. As Kenneth carefully examined the magic circuits operating within Roy, his gaze grew increasingly intense. Roy had previously told him that he became a Magus by accident, so it was clear he belonged to the first generation of Magus. For a first-generation Magus to reach this level was remarkable. His talent was undoubtedly top tier. If he could find a suitable partner and pass down his bloodline for a few generations, it would likely produce even more outstanding Magus. Moreover, he possessed the precious magic crest that had been passed down through the Matu family. Kenneth felt like he had struck gold by coming to Japan, and this treasure had practically fallen into his lap. To think that by attending a rural magical ceremony, he would encounter such talent. Kenneth's mood was clearly uplifted. The more he examined Roy, the more fervent Kenneth's gaze became. In his mind, Roy's status had risen significantly. Originally, Kenneth had planned to teach him casually, and after the Holy Grail War, he intended to send him to the Almeloi classroom for further development. After all, he never held back in his teachings, so this wouldn't violate their contract. He had thought that when the boy naturally passed away, he could send someone to retrieve the magic crest. But now, he had a better plan. Such an extraordinary genius. He couldn't just let him slip away. If he could induct this boy into the Almeloi family, not only would he gain the magic crest, but the family would also benefit from his excellent bloodline. It was a complete win-win. A double victory for him. Having made up his mind, Kenneth decided that after the Holy Grail War, he would bring Roy back to the Almeloi family for grooming. So, Professor Kenneth, does my talent meet your standards? Ahem, yes, it's barely acceptable. Kenneth coughed a few times, pulling back his fervent gaze. It's quite rare for a first-generation Magus to reach this level. Your magic attributes are wind and water, but dual-attribute Magus aren't uncommon. What's impressive is that, for a first-generation Magus, your circuits are excellent. You have 18 primary circuits and 4 auxiliary ones, all of superior quality. Roy was puzzled by Kenneth's words. He knew the number of magic circuits in his body, so how had 4 more appeared out of nowhere? 22 circuits? I remember only having 18. Humphrey, that's due to your method of developing your circuits. Let me guess, you used the crude method of forcibly stimulating them with external means, didn't you? Yes, that's right. Roy nodded. Such a foolish method only wastes your talent and damages your body. Kenneth pointed at Roy's body and continued, your 4 auxiliary circuits were dormant and hadn't been opened yet. The reason is that you didn't have enough magical energy when you forcibly activated them, or you couldn't endure until those 4 were fully stimulated. As a result, they remained dormant. I adjusted your circuits just now, stimulating them slightly, so they're now open. Did he tamper with my magic circuits? Hearing Kenneth's words, Roy instinctively shivered. Although he had noticed a faint anomaly in his circuits earlier, he thought Kenneth was merely conducting a check. It turned out he had been directly tampering with his circuits. Magic circuits are as vital to a Magus as the heart, so Roy felt a chill run through him. Seeing his reaction, Kenneth said calmly, relax. I didn't tamper with your circuits. After all, our magical contract is still in effect, so I cannot do anything that would harm you. Besides, as your teacher now, adjusting your magic circuits is part of my duty. Is that so? Hearing this, Roy calmed down. It was true. The contract they signed meant Kenneth couldn't do anything against him. Knowing this was why Roy hadn't been on guard against him. But 22 magic circuits. He closed his eyes and circulated his magical energy again, letting his circuits gradually emerge. He could clearly feel the increased magical energy conversion rate, and indeed, there were now 4 more circuits than before. Seeing Roy's excitement, Kenneth squinted and decided to establish his authority as a teacher while the moment was ripe. You are indeed a very talented young Magus, but don't become arrogant. The world is full of talented Magus. What you should focus on is steady research and gradual progress along the path of magecraft. Do you understand? I understand. Very well. Now, show me the magecraft you're most proficient in. As your teacher, I need to thoroughly understand your level so I can plan your future studies. Chapter 29, 29 Origin Impressive, I must admit, even I am in awe. In such a short time to reach this level, it seems you have a high talent for illusion magecraft. Kenneth remarked, flicking away the blue butterflies fluttering before him. I deduce that your origin is likely very much related to the aspect of illusion. Only by combining the false with the real can one outline excellent illusions. The butterfly magecraft itself is the best medium for casting illusions. Coupled with your outstanding talent, it truly gives you a significant advantage. If it were someone else, even if they had the magic crest, they wouldn't be able to perform as adeptly as you have in such a short time. Having tested Roy's magical level, even this Lord of the Clock Tower, known for his strictness, generously offered high praise. Whether in terms of the quality of magic circuits or magical aptitude, he was an extraordinarily gifted genius. Such geniuses were rare even within the entire clock tower. Even if they did exist, they were usually elites from other prominent Magus families or monsters with extraordinary talents. Kenneth felt quite envious of a genius like Roy, who had a clean background and did not belong to any Magus family. He thought that as long as he brought him into the Elmeloy family to foster even more excellent descendants and invested resources for focus training, within 3 generations, the Elmeloy family would gain a powerful and exceptional branch of illusion magecraft bloodline. A brand new, exceptional bloodline inheritance, without having to worry about issues related to the magic crest's inheritance. This would undoubtedly make the Elmeloy family even more prosperous. The temptation for Kenneth, as the head of the family, was significant. While Roy was still pondering his own origin, Kenneth was already considering how to bind Roy to the Elmeloy family's chariot after the Holy Grail War concluded. Using both kindness and authority, and then a marriage arrangement to bring him into the family was the best approach, but the choice of candidate required careful consideration. Rain seems a bit too young, but this kid isn't very old either. His talent and the magic crest are exceptionally excellent. If it works out, it wouldn't be too unfair to her. After all, there's still time, and feelings can be cultivated. Excuse me, Professor, how should a Magus explore their origin? Roy's call disrupted Kenneth's thoughts. Though he had watched many works in the Fate series, his main focus was on the fierce battles of the servants. He couldn't say he had no understanding of Magus, but it was close to non-existent. He only knew about Emiya Garatsugu and Kenneth's trademark magecraft. As for the principles of activating their magecraft and matters of origin, even the series had not explained them clearly, so how could he know? While the Kara no Kyokai series did contain knowledge in this regard, unfortunately, he hadn't remembered it, or rather, aside from watching Shiki, he hadn't really paid attention to anything else. Who would have thought that the illusion knowledge that had once seemed completely unrelated to him would reveal its great significance when he truly embarked on the path of magecraft? Additionally, being a self-taught Magus, Kenneth couldn't provide him with much advice, leaving him with significant gaps in knowledge. Therefore, he humbly sought Kenneth's guidance. His initial decision to ally with Kenneth stemmed from this. Compared to the fanatical pursuers of the Holy Grail like Tasaka Tokiomi and Emiya Garatsugu, Kenneth was the best choice. His desire for the Holy Grail wasn't as great, and they shared a common path. Furthermore, his strength and rich magical knowledge would help Roy grow more quickly. While Merlin had been teaching him life-saving techniques applicable in battle during the night, he had no time to guide him on magical knowledge and theory, leading to a scarcity of his magical theory. Now, with Kenneth's guidance, he could fill in those gaps in magical theory. Origin? Kenneth fell silent for a moment upon hearing this, then took a deep breath. You've already practiced butterfly magecraft to this extent, and yet you say you don't know what an origin is? By the way, the servant you summon should be a caster, right? Hasn't he taught you even this basic knowledge of magecraft? Hearing Roy's question, Kenneth was somewhat speechless, his voice suddenly rising, startling Roy, who instinctively shrank his neck and quickly put on a studious expression. Forget it, it's understandable for a civilian Magus to be ignorant. Your caster probably hasn't had the time to teach you due to the demands of the Holy Grail War. Rubbing his forehead, Kenneth then began patiently explaining the knowledge about origins, maintaining a serious demeanor but still being quite earnest. Now, listen carefully. The so-called origin. After a long lecture, Kenneth let out a weary sigh, sitting back on the sofa with his eyes half closed. Alright, I've basically covered the knowledge of origins. Digest it well, and if you have any questions, come ask me again. You can leave now, I need to rest. Okay, thank you very much for your help, Professor. As he left, Roy nodded in thanks to Kenneth before opening the door. After such a long time, he was also very grateful to Kenneth. Though his attitude was fierce and his words sharp, there was no denying that he was indeed a good teacher, worthy of respect for both his teaching ability and sense of responsibility. To ensure he could learn, he had extended the content of the 2-hour lesson to nearly 4 hours, starting from the basics, with detailed explanations to help him understand what origins were. He naturally grasped more knowledge in this area and formed more hypotheses about origin. According to Kenneth's explanation, the so-called origin could be understood as a person's essence. The human body and soul are both capable of change and replacement, but the essence itself never changes. Everyone has their origin, and Magus can understand a person's origin by exploring and discovering the principles behind it. To illustrate with his own understanding, for example, Shiru's origin is sword, which is why his obsession and benefits concerning sword stem from this. His unlimited blade works also extends from his origin. Only when Shiru Emi awakens his origin can he execute unlimited blade works to that extent. If it were in someone else's hands, it would be like wasting magical energy. Giritsugu's origin is severing and binding, which particularly targets Magus, hence he dismantled ribs to powder them into origin bullets, fully utilizing his origin. His high talent for illusions had been praised by both Merlin and Kenneth, so his origin was likely related to illusions. But could it really be said to be illusion? He felt that there was something off about this. It seemed not to be just that. How was it? Did you get the answers you were looking for? A familiar voice pulled him back from his thoughts. He saw the Count leaning against the wall, waiting for him to emerge from the room. It's you, Count. Upon recognizing the person, Roy smiled slightly. I would say it was quite fruitful. Thanks to Professor Kenneth, my thoughts have become much clearer. Is that so? It seems you've completely stepped into the realm of magecraft. You're doing quite well, Master. Thank you for the compliment. How about you, Count? Have you found any traces of Emiya Giritsugu? The Count shook his head. No, I'm monitoring every floor, and I can confirm that no suspicious rats have slipped in to stir up trouble. Really? Isn't today the day for the building to explode? Or do they have some new plan? Roy pondered for a moment, beginning to speculate on Emiya Giritsugu's calculations, then instructed, I'll need you to remain vigilant. If you find their traces, don't hold back. Just kill them directly. With his own involvement alongside Amikasa and even the appearances of Protogilgamesh and Fion, this Holy Grail war diverged significantly from the expected Fourth War. Without the foresight of a 1,000-mile gaze, he had no way to grasp the overall situation. Regardless of Emiya Giritsugu's plans, if he dared to play with high-rise demolitions again, Roy would surprise him. Even if the Count were to launch a surprise attack, Emiya Giritsugu, despite being a master of time alter, wouldn't escape death. After all, the Count's speed was no joke. Kill them directly. Upon hearing this, the Count nodded in agreement. Understood. I will continue to remain alert, but... The Count suddenly shifted his tone, his gaze returning to the fatigued face of Roy. Before that, you shouldn't push yourself too hard, Master. You're still very tired. Go back and rest. Wait. I still have things too. I know, but right now, what you need more is rest. Without waiting for Roy to agree, the Count picked him up and forcibly carried him back to his room. Have a good sleep, Master. Don't be too tense, just let things happen naturally from now on. I'll be here to help you. The scene shifted to the Innsburn household. At that moment, Emiya Giritsugu was engulfed in busyness. Looking at the uninvited young priest before him, Emiya Giritsugu had a gloomy expression. If he hadn't recognized him as the boy who had saved his life the previous night, he would have already pulled the trigger. However, considering that the other party had saved his life last night, along with his saber standing next to him with her sword at the ready, he didn't mind giving Amikasa an opportunity to explain himself. There's no need to carry such hostility, sir. I am not your enemy, we can sit down and talk properly. Amikasa Shiru smiled helplessly, observing the saber who was always ready to take him down. State your purpose, intruder. Saber obviously didn't believe him. Her delicate brows furrowed as she focused her gaze on the handsome boy. For some reason, she sensed a very ominous aura from Amikasa Shiru, yet she couldn't quite pinpoint it, which made her cautious. As her magical energy surged, the gale swirling around the Sword of Stars intensified. If this boy dared to make any strange moves, she would not hesitate to sever his head with her sword. There's no need for such wariness, King Arthur. I am not your enemy, on the contrary, I am a friend here to help you achieve your wish. Hearing her true name spoken aloud, Artoria became calm. Her true name had already been exposed by that lancer last night, and almost everyone present knew her true name. There was no need to keep it a secret now. My wish? Absurd. Do you even know what you're saying? Of course, I do, because I'm serious. Amikasa Shiru nodded, then disregarded Saber's blade and turned to speak to Emiya Giritsugu, who was on guard at a distance. Mr. Emiya Giritsugu, before you make any moves, would you be interested in hearing about my wish? A great wish to save all of humanity. The salvation of all humanity. Emiya Giritsugu froze for a moment, maintaining silence, but his heart couldn't help but tremble. The previously tense atmosphere became silent due to those words. We will not. Saber wanted to say something more, But Emiya Garatsugu raised his hand to stop her. Wait, Saber. Let him continue. Garatsugu, you? Very well, it seems Mr. Emiya Garatsugu also harbors noble ideals of saving the world? If that's the case, then let me tell you a story. Amika Sashiru's gentle face broke into a slight smile as he slowly opened his arms, preparing to tell this man, who also yearned to save the world, his story. It was a story filled with sorrow and desire. At the same time, it was a story filled with hope. Chapter 30, Invitation. As evening approached, the dazed Waver Velvet woke up in his room. The last rays of the setting sun streamed through the window onto his face. Last night, he had spent the whole evening attending a lesson on mystic code, dragged along by Professor Kenneth. First, he had run around with Ryder for half the night, and upon returning, he was pulled into a tutoring session by Kenneth that lasted the entire night. With Waver's poor physical condition, such a schedule naturally left him feeling exhausted and drained. He now wanted nothing more than to lie down on his soft goose-down bed and lazily sleep until tomorrow. Sleeping in such a comfortable bed in a lavish room was a luxurious experience for him, a student from a common background. Since Waver was participating in the Holy Grail War as Kenneth's assistant, he no longer had to worry about accommodation or living expenses. As for the issue of magical energy supply, Kenneth had specifically rented 3 high-grade magical energy reactors from the clock tower to ensure that Ryder and Lancer could exert their full combat capabilities without the magical energy supply faltering during battles. And with various mystic code available, Waver felt he had never fought a war so affluent in his life. Although he was still somewhat fatigued, he could not fall asleep due to the loud commotion coming from 2 individuals that completely penetrated the hotel's soundproof walls. Shut up. Ha 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 ha. Confidence and pride are virtues, but excessive confidence is arrogance. Which one are you? Ha 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 ha. What this king pursues is merely to embark on the journey of conquering the world again. To conquer what I cannot conquer is my grand ambition. I do not think this is arrogance. Do you really have confidence in achieving this absurd wish? Of course. Everything this king does will surely succeed. So, Castor, are you interested in joining my ranks and sharing this joy of conquering the world with me? Iskander confidently stated, then extended his hand to invite the count. Are you serious in inviting me, King of Conquerors? I'm not a hero or a great man. Ha ha ha. Of course. Even without knowing your true name, I can sense your extraordinary nature. For a hero like you, I must recruit you. Cra ha 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 ha. You are indeed interesting, King of Conquerors. You know, arrogance can actually be divided into 2 types, one is due to insufficient ability, and the other is due to exceptionally grand ambitions. The former seems foolish, while the latter is a rare and precious kind. And which one am I, King of Conquerors Iskander? Gazing into Iskander's eyes, the Count smiled slightly. The answer to this question was already very clear. Once the king who unified all of Greece with his iron cavalry and swept through the Middle East, how could such a conqueror lack wisdom and fighting spirit? The fire of struggle and conquest burned brightly in his eyes from the very beginning. However, his image was evidently quite different from the intimidating and admirable king depicted in history books. As Waver Velvet, his master, experienced this deeply during these past few days spent with Iskander. He had came to realize how unreliable history books were. No one would have imagined that this disheveled, red-haired giant who preferred to stay in his room all day and often criticized military channels was actually the King of Conquerors Iskander, who established the vast Alexander Empire and ranked among the 4 great commanders of Europe. Wasn't the gap between this image and the King of Conquerors he admired far too large? Was this really the King of Conquerors? Or in what way did he resemble the King of Conquerors? After this encounter with a disillusioned idol, Waver could no longer face the literature about the King of Conquerors with the same perspective. Likewise, Kenneth was very glad that he had initially prepared the King of Conquerors as cloak fragment for Waver. Although Iskander's strength as a servant was undoubtedly at the top, their compatibility could not be said to be low, it could be said that it simply didn't exist. If he were to fight alongside Iskander, the boisterous red-haired gorilla, they wouldn't even manage to work together against enemies, they would probably fall apart among themselves first. However, upon pushing open the door, Waver couldn't care about that anymore. He was still puzzled about who Iskander was talking to, given that Lancer and Kenneth's personalities wouldn't really engage with this red-haired gorilla. Could it be that he was talking to himself? With a heart full of questions, he opened the door. Upon seeing a strange servant in the workshop, Waver was so startled that he screamed, quickly dodging behind Iskander, clutching his red cloak tightly, and shouted. What on earth is going on, Ryder? Why is there another servant in Professor's workshop? And you two seem to be quite familiar, chatting so happily. What happened? Seeing Waver cower like a frightened chick behind him, Iskander frowned. Then, Waver felt a tight grip on his collar as he was suddenly lifted into the air like a small wildcat by a large hand. A pair of gigantic tiger-like eyes stared at Waver for a long time before revealing a wide, toothy grin. "Don't be so tense, kid. Let me introduce you. This is Castor. He hasn't told me his true name. However, he is now our companion. While you were sleeping, Castor's master allied with your teacher. Alliance? Are you saying that while I was asleep, teacher successfully recruited Castor's master?" Suspended in midair, Waver froze for a moment, looking a bit confused at the King of Caverns. Seeing Waver's gaze, the Count nodded. "That's right. We can indeed be considered allies now." "I see. Wait a minute." After thinking for a while, Waver suddenly realized his awkward position and started shouting again, "Idiot writer, put me down. Is this how you treat your own master? Ha 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 ha. What does it matter? Now Castor is not an outsider. I'm not talking about that. You idiot, can't you at least listen to me? This is too embarrassing. Put me down. Let me down." Looking at Iskander's carefree expression and the somewhat amused gaze of the King of Caverns, Waver's face turned red with embarrassment. Just as he was about to explode, he heard a familiar voice from behind. "That's enough. Waver Velvet, how can you be making such a racket right after waking up? What kind of behavior is this? Don't you have any awareness as a student of El Meloy? Or do you want to go back and add a few more review essays?" "I'm sorry, Professor Kenneth." Hearing this sharp and biting voice, a shiver ran down Waver Velvet's spine as his DNA instinctively recalled the fear he felt under Kenneth's control. He quickly responded. After this period of training, he now felt a mix of respect and fear towards Kenneth. He respected him because Kenneth, as his teacher, was exceptionally outstanding in both educational level and talent. Under his training, Waver's progress was visible to the naked eye, and Kenneth took care of his safety by providing him with many high-level mystic code for self-defense. He feared him because Kenneth was equally strict as a teacher. The various magical assignments left him dizzy, and his inherently rigorous personality allowed for no mistakes. During this time, he had received plenty of attention from Kenneth, and just thinking about the relentless assignments and Kenneth's merciless criticism made his stomach hurt. "Look, kid, that's our new ally, the Master of Castor." Seeing them arrive, Iskander put Waver down from the air and pointed to Roy beside Kenneth. Under the pressure of the Count, he had managed to sleep for about 2 hours, and judging by his complexion, he had recovered quite well. Upon seeing the rider group that appeared here, he was momentarily taken aback. The trajectory of Waver and Kenneth in this world was very different from what he had expected. Waver did not sneak away to Japan to prove himself to Kenneth. Instead, they teamed up to participate in the Holy Grail War together. So what exactly happened? Was this a butterfly effect? Did Waver in this world not write that paper? Did other teams experience similar changes? With many questions in mind, Roy began to ponder. However, they were allies now, and as fellow students, with Waver's group joining, their strength undoubtedly increased. At least this change was beneficial for him. "Ah." Waver turned around and saw Roy, standing next to Kenneth, waving at him. Roy's demeanor was quite proper. "Hello, Waver-senpai. I'm the Master of Castor. Like you, I've now become a student of Professor Kenneth, so I can be considered your kuhai." "Kuhai?" Hearing this term, Waver was taken aback and turned his head to look at Kenneth with a puzzled expression. Things were changing too quickly for him to understand what was happening. He had only slept for about 5 hours, and now he suddenly had a kuhai? "That's right. I've invited Roy to join the El Meloy classroom. According to seniority, Roy is indeed your junior now, but..." Kenneth's tone changed as he continued. "However, Waver, don't get too pleased. Although he's just a first-generation Magus, Roy's magical aptitude is very high, far surpassing yours, which only has 3 generations of inheritance. First-generation Magus, very high talent." Upon hearing this, Waver was taken aback. It was the first time he had heard Kenneth praise a student so much. He curiously examined Roy. The fact that this young man could be praised in such a way by the usually sharp-tongued Kenneth was a reflection of his high talent. But how did Kenneth receive this student? Could it be that while I was sleeping, the teacher went to Castor's magical workshop and physically persuaded Roy, ultimately recognizing his potential and bringing him back as a student? But it's still daytime, right? Isn't it said that battles can't happen during the day? It can't be that Roy came to surrender himself, right? Lost in these thoughts, Waver was suddenly jolted awake by Kenneth's cold snort. "Idiot, what are you standing around for? It's almost evening. Hurry up and prepare. Take Roy to my magical workshop to get some mystic code for self-defense. We're going to a place tonight." "Where?" Waver asked. "To the supervisor of the Holy Grail War. Although I dislike those priests, I can't deny that they know more about the Holy Grail War than we do. It's necessary for us to pay a visit." As he spoke, Kenneth handed the invitation letter he had taken from his pocket to the two of them. This is the invitation letter sent by the church's familiars this afternoon. They seem to be gathering all the masters. Although it's a bit mysterious, we'll still be there to show our presence. I'm also curious about what tricks they're up to. Of course, even if this is a trap, we still have 3 servants on our side, so there shouldn't be any problems. Compared to Kenneth's confidence, Roy's eyes flashed with a hint of worry. Amakusashiru Tokai Sada, what kind of trick are you pulling? Chapter 31, 31 Master Plan Fuiuki Church. As time passed and the night deepened, moonlight cascaded from the sky, illuminating the beautiful building and giving it an ethereal glow. The cross on the rooftop shimmered slightly, transforming into a beacon of magical energy that summoned the masters participating in the Holy Grail War. This should be the place, right? Standing outside, Artoria lifted her gaze, examining the church. Go inside, Saber. If you need any assistance, I'll support you from a distance. At that moment, Garrett Sugu's voice came through her earpiece. After everything that had happened the previous night, he was now even more cautious about showing himself. Despite the priest's assurances, as a skilled Magus killer, he trusted no one lightly. The invitation to gather all the masters in one place might have been explained to him in advance by that priest, but there was no guarantee that everything Amakusa had said was true. If this was a trap, the consequences would be unimaginable. After all, this was the church, the territory of those priests, and entering it blindly was too dangerous. The church was a stronghold for the priests, just as a magical workshop was for a magus. Once inside, they would be at a severe disadvantage. If Amakusashiru had set up any traps in advance, the outcome would be disastrous.